Chapter 2609, Attacking Martial's Soul Mountain. The method that the Martial's Soul lineage employed to destroy the formations was to deplete the Mountain Soul's energy along with the energy of the Four Symbols Alliance's formations. The energy of the Mountain Soul came from the real Martial's Soul Mountain. The Martial's Soul Mountain was basically a colossal, almost infinite, source of energy, replenishing the Mountain Soul from an extremely great distance away. As a result, the Martial's Soul lineage did not have to worry about depleting too much of their own energy at all. They were now attacking the headquarters of the Four Symbols Alliance after all. When the peak organizations fused together to form the Four Symbols Alliance in the past, they had always guarded the southern region. They had already turned the southern region into an impenetrable fortress. This was their final line of defense. It was astonishingly powerful, enough to block the attacks of Third Heavenly Layer Grand Primes. They could hold their ground for a while against even Fourth Heavenly Layer Grand Primes. As a result, the Martial's Soul lineage and the Righteous Alliance did have to pay quite the price to get through the formation forcefully. Moreover, there was going to be a bitter battle after destroying the formation. If they spent too much power on destroying the formation, the Righteous Alliance would definitely suffer extremely severe casualties in the upcoming battle. As a result, attacking the formation was completely left up to the Martial's Soul lineage so that they could retain the prowess of the Righteous Alliance as much as possible, reducing the future casualties to a minimum. After all, the Righteous Alliance was no longer the dominating force that possessed an absolute advantage over the Four Symbols Alliance anymore with Luo Mantian, Guli, and He-Dao's betrayals. As a result, they had to rely on the Martial's Soul lineage to destroy the Four Symbols Alliance. As the Martial's Soul lineage attacked the formation, the three Grand Primes of the Righteous Alliance all looked at the huge beam of energy from the Mountain Soul as well. Their faces all hardened when they sensed the terrifying energy within it. Have you sensed it? The Martial's Soul lineage seems to be using the energy of the Martial's Soul Mountain when they're attacking the formation. That way, they won't have to expend anything to launch such a powerful attack. The Martial's Soul lineage really deserves their reputation. Although they don't have any Grand Primes, they're actually much more powerful than many peak organizations in the Saints' world. With the Martial's Soul lineage, the Four Symbols Alliance will definitely be destroyed. Their protective formations are powerful, but under the endless attack from the Martial's Soul lineage, they will deplete their energy reserves severely. Let's see how much longer they can last. The three ancestors of the Righteous Alliance conversed secretly. At the same time, armies had assembled within the protective formations of the Four Symbols Alliance as well. All the cultivators, regardless of strength, stood in formations, ready for battle at any time. However, their morale was clearly low. The formation's energy is depleting far too quickly. If this continues, we won't be able to last much longer, the Gentle Breeze ancestor stared outside the formation and said sternly. Even though their protective formations only rippled under the Martial's Soul Mountain's attack, the Martial's Soul Mountain maintained the beam of energy the entire time. As a result, the formation was constantly under attack, and its energy would constantly decrease. If this continued, the amount of energy depleted in a single day would be extremely terrifying. There's no need to worry. Just find a way to draw out Jian Chen. I have a way of turning the situation around, said the young Star Lord. He stared at the armies of the Righteous Alliance outside and remained extremely composed. Even though the situation right before him was completely against the Four Symbols Alliance, the young Star Lord showed no fear at all. He was the child of the 9 brilliant Star Lord. He was confident that even if the Four Symbols Alliance was destroyed, the Righteous Alliance and Martial's Soul lineage would not touch a single hair on him. Alright, the Gentle Breeze ancestor accepted what he said. He glanced at Wu Lu, Gong Ji, Changfeng Yun, Luo Mantian, and He-Dao and said, "This is a battle of life and death this time. None of us can afford to hold back. Everyone, please receive the opponents with me." With that, the 6 Grand Primes of the Four Symbols Alliance flew out from the protective formations at the same time. However, their targets were not the 3 experts of the Righteous Alliance. Instead, they charged directly towards outer space and headed for the Martial's Soul Mountain. "Collapse their formation and force out Jian Chen," said the Gentle Breeze ancestor gently. He felt the same towards Jian Chen as before. He was someone best left alone. However, now that he had run out of choices, combined with the pressure of the current situation, he was forced to abide to the young Star Lord. The 6 Grand Primes of the Four Symbols Alliance set out together. Immediately, pressure flooded the surroundings as terrifying pulses of energy radiated from them. It shook up the space there and distorted the galaxies. With a single step, they arrived before the illusionary Martial Soul Mountain. They did not scatter, remaining together. They all drew their various god artifacts and tremendous energy surged into their weapons, causing them to shine brightly. Crack! Crack! The space around them constantly shattered. This was space collapsing. Swathes of space were reduced to darkness as the stars vanished. The 6 of them still had not used their full strength. Just the energy pulses from the god artifacts were devastating enough. Flawless sky. At this moment, a bellow rang out. Luo Mantian struck out first. He wielded a medium-quality god artifact, directly using a god-tier battle skill to stab at the Martial Soul Mountain. As he stabbed out, a huge crack in space appeared. The sword easily ripped through space as it created a deep, green sword chi that shoot towards the Martial Soul Mountain with terrifying energy and pressure. Lightning of the heavenly ways. He Dao called out as well. He held a wooden staff in his hands. It was laced with the presence of time and was also a medium-quality god artifact. He extended the wooden staff in his hand, and a pressure immediately permeated the surroundings. Terrifying energy and power of laws rose up before condensing into a bolt of lightning in the end. It shot towards the Martial Soul Mountain as a flash. The laws he comprehended had nothing to do with lightning. It was purely because of the god-tier battle skill that it was like lightning. Life and death exists in the world. The world gives birth to you, but I bring death upon you. Gong Ji muttered softly. A gray presence permeated her face. At that moment, she radiated with a heavy presence of death as an invisible pulse appeared from her body and expanded towards the Martial Soul Mountain. Wherever the invisible pulse passed by, everything seemed to wither up, including outer space. It was the laws of death. Gong Ji happened to comprehend the laws of death. Chapter 2610, Killing Luo Mantian, 1. The 6 Grand Primes of the Four Symbols Alliance struck out simultaneously. They all unleashed their full strength, using various god-tier battle skills and terrifying secret techniques. They possessed utterly frightening power, devastating the space there, seemingly reducing it to chaos. All of their attacks were concentrated on a single point, so their power did not scatter. It all landed on the Martial Soul Mountain. The 6 of them could tell very clearly that the formation created by the 8 successors of the Martial Soul lineage only expended the energy of the illusionary Martial Soul Mountain. It basically placed no burden on the 8 of them. As a result, even if they maintained their attack on the formations of the Four Symbols Alliance for nights and days on end, it would not take much toll on them at all. However, the Four Symbols Alliance would be forced to expend tremendous amounts of energy defending. They would be forced into an extremely reactive situation. As a result, not only did they plan on destroying the Martial Soul lineage's formation this time and draw out Jianshan according to the young Star Lord's plan, they also wanted to combine their strength to destroy the Martial Soul Mountain in an unexpected fashion. Once the illusionary Martial Soul Mountain collapsed, the Martial Soul lineage would lose their never-ending energy source. Their protective formations would be able to last for even longer. The faces of Tong Wuming, Lian Wuji, and Zhou Zhidao, who had remained on guard the entire time, sank when they saw the actions of the 6 experts. Oh no! Stop them! They're trying to destroy the Martial Soul Mountain. Don't let them succeed. The 3 of them called out. With a single movement, they appeared in outer space immediately and did their best to stop the Grand Primes from the Four Symbols Alliance. Although they could still get through the formations if they worked with the Martial Soul lineage once the Martial Soul Mountain was destroyed, it would require much more effort. However, it was already too late for them. The 6 Grand Primes of the Four Symbols Alliance had launched a completely unexpected attack that was finished in an instant. Even if the 3 of them wanted to stop an attack or two, they could not. They could only watch the 6 powerful attacks that they would require their full strength to receive land on the Martial Soul Mountain. The power of the Mountain Soul can even endure quite a while against attacks from a 5th Heavenly Layer Grand Prime, let alone you. Can the 6 of you reach the level of 5th Heavenly Layer Grand Primes when you combine your strength? Zang laughed aloud from the Mountain Soul. As he chuckled, a barrier of light rose up from the Mountain Soul, enveloping the entire mountain. Boom! 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 The 6 terrifying attacks landed on the screen of light, but it only rippled slightly before returning to normal. The defenses are far too powerful. How is that possible? This isn't even the true Martial Soul Mountain. It's only the rumored illusionary projection that the Martial Soul lineage conjures with a portion of the Martial Soul Mountain's power. Just the projection is so powerful. The Martial Soul lineage is simply too terrifying. This sight utterly stunned the 6 peak experts. They were dumbfounded as disbelief filled their faces. The Martial Soul lineage is actually so terrifying. Tong Wuming, Lian Wuji, and Zhou Zhidao, who had made their way over, were stunned by this sight as well. These ancestors of the Cloud Plane did not possess a lot of information on the Martial Soul lineage. Most of them read about them in records or heard of them from rumors. Such sources would never go into great detail, making what they knew extremely limited. As a result, they were very shocked. Since you've come out yourselves, come fight. Zang stood up. His presence climbed. He had already left the mountain, charging towards the 6 experts of the 4 Symbols Alliance. Junior brothers and sister, stay here. I'll go out and try them. Chu Jian also stood up and emerged from the formaton. His presence billowed as he made his way out whilst laughing aloud. We don't even need to use the Martial Soul Array against them. Since they've chosen to come out, we'll slaughter them on the spot. In the end, Yu Chao left as well. The 3 most powerful experts of the Martial Soul lineage had come out together. Their appearances immediately made a chill run down the spines of the 6 experts. They all became extremely stern. They felt great fear towards the Martial Soul lineage. Kill! The Gentle Breeze ancestor called out. He equipped a set of God artifact armor. Fully geared, he went to receive Zang. Chu Jian faced Luo Mantian, while Yu Chao faced Gong Ji. Chang Fengyun, He Dao, and Wu Lu faced Tong Wuming, Lian Wuji, and Zhou Zhidao. Immediately, deafening booms rang out in outer space. The various laws mixed and mingled, forming a devastating power with all the violent energy. It caused the stars to tremble. The difference in strength between the 3 experts of the Righteous Alliance and Chang Fengyun, He Dao, and Wu Lu was not particularly great. They were basically equally matched. Even if their battle prowess differed slightly, the battle would not end quickly. However, Luo Mantian and Gong Ji were not as fortunate. They faced Chu Jian and Yu Chao of the Martial Soul lineage. As soon as they began fighting, their souls were stunned by the secret techniques of the Martial Soul lineage. They lost the upper hand. Luo Mantian and Gong Ji both became rather pale. They gritted their teeth and endured. Blood oozed from the corner of their mouths. The blood did not come from physical wounds. Instead, they had bit their tongues to stimulate their awareness when their souls were bombarded. In the battle last time, they outnumbered the Martial Soul lineage 2-1, so they could slowly recover against the soul attacks of the Martial Soul lineage with someone else sharing the burden. Now that they fought alone, they could only depend on themselves. Of course, they had a way of dealing with the attacks that did not really work, and that was immediately pulling away from their opponent once their souls were attacked. They only needed 5 seconds to recover. Seniors, let's assist second senior brother in killing Luo Mantian, Jian Chen said sternly on the Martial Soul Mountain. On the current battlefield, the person he wanted to kill the most was Luo Mantian. Not only was he the first person to launch a sneak attack on the Lord of the Heavens Linked Peak, but he had used a dagger imbued with the laws of Cruzes as well, bringing great danger to the Peak Lord. That was the reason why the Lord of the Heavens Linked Peak did not take part in the battle this time. Instead, he remained on the Heaven's Link peak to suppress the curse as much as he could. No one objected to Jian Chen's request. Very soon, the situation on the Martial Soul Mountain changed again. The 5 of them fell into another formation that locked onto Luo Mantian. In the end, a powerful beam of light shot out. Luo Mantian had always remained wary of the Martial Soul Mountain. As soon as he sensed their actions as well as the beam of light that shot towards him, his expression immediately changed. He dared not take it on forcefully. He did not attempt to block it. Instead, with a single movement, he directly hit into a spatial crack behind him. The laws were incomplete, and the elements were reversed within the spatial crack. Various violent streams of energy wreaked havoc as chaotic time formed vortices that rapidly revolved. It was so dangerous inside that even primordial realm experts needed to be careful when they set foot in there. If they were careless, they could even die. In the past, when Jian Shen faced the pursuit of the Azure Pen King, the only reason why he could rampage through there fearlessly was because he had the Inata Tower. As Luo Mantian fled into the spatial crack, the beam of light from the Martial Soul Mountain entered right behind him as well. However, as soon as the beam of energy entered the spatial crack, the terrifying shockwaves destabilized the interior of the crack. Just like a domino effect, all the chaotic streams of energy in the entire crack became extremely violent. Temporal vortices rapidly swept through the surroundings. The beam of energy from the Martial Soul Mountain was rapidly weakened. It grew dimmer and dimmer before colliding with a temporal vortex. As if it had gone through endless weakening, it dispersed into nothingness. Luo Mantian successfully dodged the attack. Do you think you're safe just by fleeing there? Afterwards, Chu Jian entered the spatial crack as well. His presence surged, and with a wave of his hand, he destroyed the chaotic streams of energy near him. He began fighting Luo Mantian again with his sword in hand. Chapter 26:11, Killing Luo Mantian. 2. Chu Jian and Luo Mantian were embroiled in an intense battle within the spatial crack. As a result, the region within several 100,000 kilometers in the spatial crack surged as they fought. Powerful, terrifying streams of energy surged about. Under the influence of the energy, the temporal vortices began to approach one another slowly. When 2 temporal vortices collided, they would either mutually annihilate or be devoured by one of the temporal vortices, making it even more powerful. Within this special space, Chu Jian and Luo Mantian had to dodge these temporal vortices as they fought. With their current level of cultivation, they could ignore the streams of energy, but they had to be extremely careful about these temporal vortices. These temporal vortices contained the laws of time. The flow of time would vary from vortex to vortex. Within some powerful temporal vortices, a split second inside could be equivalent to millions of years, tens of millions of years, or even longer. Moreover, the flow of time was not just forwards. It could regress as well. If it advanced forwards, it would be rather difficult for them to pose any particular harm, seeing how they managed to gain eternal life with their great realms of cultivation, but if they regressed by 1,000,000 years or even 10 million years, it would be equivalent to a regression in cultivation. Martial soul lineage, the whole matter still hasn't reached a point of no return, so why must you force us so bitterly like this, trying to kill us all? Why don't we both take a step back? That way, you can save your relationship with the young Star Lord from worsening any further. Luo Mantian stared at Chu Jian emotionlessly and called out. His armor shone with dazzling light as energy condensed around him, almost to a point where it was tangible. Even though his cultivation completely exceeded Chu Jian's, Luo Mantian's hands were completely tied against martial soul force. What was even more terrifying was that every single move and attack from members of the martial soul lineage would possess a sliver of martial soul force. Even though it was not as powerful as the martial soul force in secret techniques, they clashed at lightning speed with their current level of cultivation. They could exchange hundreds of blows in a few seconds. As the martial soul force accumulated from all those attacks, Luo Mantian would be in great pain even with his cultivation as a second heavenly layer Grand Prime. It would take a heavy toll on his soul. Moreover, he had to endure secret techniques from the martial soul mountain from time to time. These secret techniques were the truly terrifying aspect of the martial soul lineage. Every single technique possessed the incredible power to instantly heavily injure or kill opponents of the same level. Although it was very difficult for Luo Mantian's soul to be heavily injured as a second heavenly layer Grand Prime, it could stun him momentarily and bring on great agony. As a result, Luo Mantian developed the thought that it would be for the best if they could just stop fighting. Chu Jian sneered in response to Luo Mantian. "You're called Luo Mantian, right? That's pretty funny. If it were over some other matters, our martial soul lineage might not bicker with you as much. After all, the young Star Lord's foster father, the 9 Brilliant Star Lord, does carry some weight in the Saints' world." Unfortunately, the matter this time threatened 8th junior brother's life. If we had come a little later, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Who knows how long it has been since 8 successors have appeared for our martial soul lineage, yet we almost lost a junior brother on the cloud plane. This grievance has already reached the point of no return, so even if we offend the young Star Lord, we will kill you all. And just the young Star Lord isn't enough to attract any attention from us. In reality, our martial soul lineage fears no one from the Star Brilliance plane aside from the 9 Brilliant Star Lord. Chu Jian's voice rang out with firm determination. The killing intent was pressing, making Luo Mantian become extremely stern. "Isn't Jian Chen still alive? He's not even injured, so why must you do this?" Luo Mantian continued. Chu Jian's battle prowess was just too great. He possessed quite a few treasures on him as well, and he possessed martial soul force. All that awaited Luo Mantian was defeat if they kept fighting. The more drawn out a battle against a member of the martial soul lineage was, the worse it would be for him. "Luo Mantian, do you think our martial soul lineage can just be provoked like that?" Chu Jian sneered. He launched the soul-destroying technique and immediately made Luo Mantian quiver and grunt. The agony from his soul made Luo Mantian temporarily blank out. However, Luo Mantian already had experience in dealing with these attacks. From the moment his soul began to hurt, he quickly flew backwards instinctually, pulling away from Chu Jian. "Do you think you're safe with just that?" Chu Jian sneered coldly. He suddenly struck out. The sword in his hand exploded with sword chi as he swung it towards Luo Mantian. Luo Mantian was several dozen kilometers away from him. A huge temporal vortex spun there. Originally, the temporal vortex moved away from Luo Mantian such that it was impossible for it to come in contact with him. However, when Chu Jian slashed out, the power that had erupted made the trajectory of the temporal vortex change. It rapidly approached Luo Mantian. If he was still clear-minded, Luo Mantian could have dodged the huge temporal vortex easily. However, he had temporarily lost sense of the outside world due to the soul-destroying technique. He failed to sense the temporal vortex's approach at all. That was not all. Just when Luo Mantian was about to fall into the temporal vortex, Chu Jian used another secret technique. He suddenly pressed his finger onto his forehead, and his eyes became pitch black. At the same time, Chu Jian's martial soul force depleted at a shocking rate. In just a single instance, half of Chu Jian's 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime martial soul force was gone. Even for Chu Jian, it was rather difficult for him to endure losing half of his martial soul force in a single moment. A sliver of exhaustion appeared on his face. However, with the appearance of exhaustion, a sense of terrifying danger appeared. It was enough to cause despair for 9th heavenly layer chaotic primes, where even the face's 1st heavenly layer grand primes would harden as they faced it. Heaven-severing technique. Chu Jian suddenly pointed at Luo Mantian with the finger he had pressed against his forehead. With that, half of Chu Jian's martial soul force immediately surged out. A flash of light that only members of the martial soul lineage could see appeared. It turned into an invisible blade, descending onto Luo Mantian's head in an instant. It directly landed on his soul. That slash seemed to split the world in half, where even all the laws of the world could not stop it. As a result, the slash directly broke through all of Luo Mantian's energy defenses, ignoring the god artifact on Luo Mantian and slashing down viciously onto Luo Mantian's soul. It was no longer as simple as a quiver and a grunt for Luo Mantian now that he had taken on the heaven-severing technique. Instead, he directly cried out miserably. His face immediately paled, without a trace of blood left. Blood spurted out from all of his facial openings. His soul became extremely dim. It seemed like it was on the verge of collapse. Chu Jian's heaven-severing technique was just too powerful. No one at the same level of cultivation could endure it. Even first heavenly layer grand primes would face a chance of dying. Even though Luo Mantian had managed to endure it with his second heavenly layer soul, he clearly still paid a heavy price. Afterwards, Luo Mantian clutched his head firmly and fell into the huge temporal vortex. If he were at his peak condition, he could use his powerful cultivation to forcefully break out. However, his soul was now more injured than it had ever been before, almost at the edge of unconsciousness. His mind had even descended into a mess, so he could not prepare at all when he fell into the temporal vortex. The temporal vortex spun rapidly. The laws of time in there were extremely chaotic. Luo Mantian's god artifact rapidly dimmed, and even the pulse from his cultivation became weaker and weaker. In just a few seconds, his god artifact returned to its original state. Clearly, there was no energy left within the armor at all. Who knows whether Luo Mantian advanced or regressed in time during those few seconds. All of the energy in the god artifact was gone, and even the power of his cultivation vanished. At this moment, a rope appeared in Chu Jian's hands. It was a low-quality god artifact. He tossed it into the temporal vortex and wrapped it around Luo Mantian. As soon as the rope entered the temporal vortex, it immediately began to dim at a visible rate. The energy within the rope leaked away at an extremely terrifying rate. Chu Jian was stern as he looked at the rope in his hands. Without any hesitation at all, he pulled it hard and forcefully yanked Luo Mantian out of the temporal vortex. Luo Mantian was a grand prime. He possessed eternal life, so he did not lose anything obvious in the temporal vortex. However, his god artifact had completely run out of energy. Even all of the power of his cultivation had been sapped. His cultivation did not regress. However, it was very clear that the tremendous energy within him had all been drained away, as if he had just experienced an endless amount of time. However, his soul just happened to remain the same as when he fell into the temporal vortex. It did not go through any obvious changes in there. Your soul has the imprint of ways. Clearly, this temporal vortex hasn't reached the level where it can destroy the souls of grand primes, or it would have been impossible for your soul to last until now. Chu Jian stared at Luo Mantian. Luo Mantian still had not recovered yet. Without the defenses of his god artifact and with his power completely sapped, he posed no threat to Chu Jian anymore. Swish! In the next moment, Chu Jian stabbed out and piercing Luo Mantian's forehead, killing him on the spot. Chapter 26:12. Before the final battle, the spatial crack where Chu Jian and Luo Mantian fought had not closed up, so all the peak experts saw exactly what happened in there. As a result, when the grand primes from both alliances saw Luo Mantian die, they were all shocked. They were thrown into emotional turmoil. Although 2 grand primes had died in the battle before, they were only first heavenly layer grand primes. Zheng Hu, in particular, had only reached grand prime recently, making him one of the weakest existences present. Luo Mantian was a reliable expert who had become a grand prime many years ago. He had reached the second heavenly layer. His death naturally caused quite the impact to everyone. Luo Mantian is actually dead. Biyao, who had betrayed the righteous alliance with Luo Mantian, experienced strewn feelings. There was some sorrow. In just half a month after leaving the righteous alliance, Guli died first, and then Luo Mantian now. The righteous alliance, which should have been destroyed, already instead possesses the absolute advantage now. Was our choice back then really wrong? Biyao's heart weighed heavily. This was the first time he had begun to regret their betrayal. However, when he saw the young Star Lord below, he could not help but calm down. He thought, so what if Jian Shen has the support of the martial soul lineage? Behind us is the young Star Lord who represents the Star Brilliance plane. The young Star Lord still hasn't done anything right now, so he's probably preparing something. I believe it will be shocking the moment the young Star Lord takes action. He'll be able to turn the situation around in a single stroke. Chu Jian had already emerged from the spatial crack with Luo Mantian's corpse, returning to the battlefield. He knew Jianshan required a large number of corpses, so he just tossed the corpse onto the mountain soul. Jianshan rejoiced on the mountain soul. He caught Luo Mantian's corpse with surging emotions. He now possessed 3 grand prime corpses. They came from Zhenghu, Guli, and Luo Mantian. Chu Jian did not take Luo Mantian's space ring. The successors of the martial soul lineage all knew that it was very difficult for the wealth of these weaker grand primes to interest Han Zang, Chu Jian, and Yu Chao. As a result, he left everything in the space ring to the 5 of them to share and divide. However, it was not the time to check the contents of the space ring. Jianshan stowed Luo Mantian's corpse away before falling into formation again. This time, let's kill He Dao. None of those who had betrayed the righteous alliance can be spared, said Jianshan as he stared coldly at He Dao as he fought against Zhou Zhidao. He Dao and Zhou Zhidao were both first heavenly layer grand primes, so they were equally matched. They could do nothing to each other. However, when Jianshan looked at He Dao sensed it. He made eye contact with Jianshan from afar. When he saw the coldness in Jianshan's eyes, his heart immediately shivered. He knew he had become the next target. The deaths of Zhenghu, Guli, and Luo Mantian had an extremely great impact on He Dao such that his fear towards the martial soul lineage had reached an absolute maximum. As a result, when he sensed Jianshan's gaze, he did not hesitate at all. He immediately abandoned Zhou Zhidao, turning around to flee. Grand primes moved extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, He Dao vanished from outer space, returning to the protective formations of the 4 Symbols Alliance. The protective formation could hide anything, whether it be presence or the scenery inside, from the outside. As a result, as soon as he entered the protective formation, it was impossible to find a target even if members of the martial soul lineage wanted to launch attacks with martial soul force. Retreat. He Dao's flight was followed up with an order from the Gentle Breeze ancestor. They were never the martial soul lineage's opponent. Now that Luo Mantian had died and He Dao had fled, their opponents had freed up 2 more people. If they kept on fighting, their defeat would only come faster. At that moment, the Grand Primes of the 4 Symbols Alliance all vanished from outer space. They returned to the protective formations. God damn it. Martial soul force is just too hard to guard against. The power of my soul drains at an exorbitant rate when I fight against a member of the martial soul lineage. My soul has to get shaken up from time to time as well, Gong Ji said with a pale face as soon as she returned to the protective formations. Her face was extremely sunken and had a sliver of exhaustion. It's detestable. I'm a mighty 2nd heavenly layer Grand Prime, yet I've been reduced to such a sorry shape by a 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime kid. Something as strange as the martial soul lineage shouldn't exist in the world. Luo Mantian died so quickly. We really don't have any chance at victory now. The Gentle Breeze ancestor sighed gently. He was solemn. The martial soul lineage was just too powerful. They only had 3 9th heavenly layer chaotic primes, yet they beat up the grand primes of the 4 Symbols Alliance into such sorry shapes. It embittered the Gentle Breeze ancestor. Where is Jianshan? Why hasn't Jianshan come out? Didn't I tell you to draw out Jianshan? There's so many of you, yet you can't even complete such a small task. The young Star Lord arrived with an ugly expression as he scolded them. The young Star Lord was extremely impatient about killing Jianshan. Now that he had finally obtained a trump card that could kill Jianshan, he was unwilling to wait a second longer. According to his belief, after he used the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance's feather to kill Jianshan, there would still be some spare power that could slaughter the martial soul lineage. He believed that as soon as he used the feather, he would instantly turn the tables for the 4 Symbols Alliance. This feather is my greatest trump card for killing Jianshan, so I can't reveal it beforehand. Otherwise, once Jianshan becomes wary, success will be difficult. The young Star Lord was extremely vexed. Boom! At this moment, a deafening rumble rang out. The earth shook and so did the protective formation around the Four Symbols Alliance. It exploded with dazzling light. After that, booms constantly rang out. It became more powerful and terrifying with each coming boom. Just the sound itself was devastating. Oh no, the Righteous Alliance has begun attacking. The expressions of the experts from the Four Symbols Alliance changed. Energy surged and light filled the air outside the formation. The entire cloud plain was affected, alarming countless people. All the elite experts of the Tong family, Cosmic Sect, and Fire God clan had fallen into formations. Under the orders of their ancestors, they used up as much energy as they needed to launch forceful attacks at the protective barrier of the Four Symbols Alliance. Even the ancestors had taken action. Tong Wuming, Zhou Zhidao, and Lian Wuji all wielded god artifacts, radiating with alarming power. They attacked the formation as well, where every single move and strike was devastating. They caused space to sink. As Luo Mantian had died in the battle before, the Four Symbols Alliance's power had decreased again. As a result, the difference between the two sides had widened once more, which was why the three Grand Primes no longer cared about wasting some energy. With the assistance of the Martial Soul lineage, there was no chance for the Four Symbols Alliance to achieve victory even if the three of them did not fight. The members of the Martial Soul lineage returned to the Martial Soul Mountain. They used the same method as before, drawing out the power of the mountain soul to waste away the energy of the formation in the least costly manner. Immediately, the three Grand Primes and all the Chaotic Primes, Infinite Primes, and Godhood cultivators from the three organizations launched a relentless barrage of attacks. The power of the protective formations of the Four Symbols Alliance depleted at an unbelievable rate. Chapter 26:13. The two emperors. The interior of the Four Symbols Alliance shook like there was a huge earthquake. Even Godhood cultivators could not help but sway as they stood inside. Fortunately, the headquarters of the Four Symbols Alliance was covered with formations. Under the protection of these formations, the violent shaking failed to create any major damage. Basically all the forces of the Four Symbols Alliance were gathered in there right now. They all stared at the formation that erupted with dazzling light in the sky silently. The atmosphere seemed extremely heavy. At this rate of attack, we probably can't even last half a month, He Dao said sternly. As he looked at the experts of the Four Symbols Alliance who could only hide within the formations, he was filled with mixed emotions. Let alone half a month, even 7 days would be very difficult. After all, there are three Grand Primes out there, coupled with the combined attacks from many Chaotic Primes, Infinite Primes, and Godhood cultivators, Gong Ji said with a darkened face. She had become filled with anger over their current predicament. She glanced past the young Star Lord perhaps out of coincidence and showed displeasure for the first time. The Four Symbols Alliance had already entered such dire straits, yet the Star Brilliance plane still had not sent reinforcements. From how the young Star Lord acted, it seemed like he did not ask for reinforcements at all. This made Gong Ji extremely vexed. Organize the retreat and activate the interplanar teleportation formation. Send the people who have some talent to other planes. If we really become utterly doomed, we have to leave behind some survivors for our clans or sects at the very least. Moreover, pour all the divine crystals and items we have accumulated over the years that can support formations into the formations. Buy as much time as we can. The gentle breeze ancestor passed down an order helplessly. His order immediately led to a disturbance in the Four Symbols Alliance. Many of them paled, as the order meant that the Four Symbols Alliance was truly done for. The ancestors of the Four Symbols Alliance were preparing for its destruction. Young Star Lord, the only reason why our Four Symbols Alliance faces its current predicament is because of you. Our Four Symbols Alliance no longer possesses any power to use against the Martial Soul lineage and the Righteous Alliance. It has already become like this, so are you really going to do nothing? Wu Lu asked sternly. The young Star Lord's behavior almost made Wu Lu lose his patience. He was no longer as polite to the young Star Lord anymore. What are you worrying for? Aren't I still here? We still haven't even reached the final moment yet. The young Star Lord frowned and said with some irritation, "The only people you can blame is yourselves. I told you to draw out Jian Chen. As long as Jian Chen came out, the whole matter would be resolved. In the end, so many of you went out and one even died, yet you still failed to draw out Jian Chen. Whose fault can it be?" The Four Symbols Alliance had already arranged their retreat. They began choosing their talented juniors to send away from the Cloud Plain. Two old men who were great elders in the Four Symbols Alliance secretly sighed when they witnessed this. They took out a jade slip and began a secret conversation. The two old men were chaotic primes. They were the two ancestral emperors who managed to survive the various battles with the Righteous Alliance after the Blood Sun Empire yielded to the Four Symbols Alliance. At the same time, the dragon-robed Blood Emperor stood atop the Imperial Palace in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. He stared in the direction of the Four Symbols Alliance as he was extremely stern and filled with worry. Although the Blood Sun Empire was an organization that belonged to the Four Symbols Alliance, the Righteous Alliance never took them seriously. After all, in the eyes of the three peak organizations of the Righteous Alliance, the Blood Sun Empire really was just a slightly larger ant despite being the everlasting empire that seemed to control the southern region. As a result, the Blood Sun Empire did not suffer when the enemy attacked the headquarters of the Four Symbols Alliance this time. Suddenly, the Blood Emperor's expression changed. With a flip of his hand, a jade slip suddenly appeared. The Blood Emperor's expression changed rapidly when he looked at the jade slip. He seemed to become much older. He gave off a presence of decline. The ancestral emperors are actually using my bloodline plan. Is the Four Symbols Alliance really done for? Will our Blood Sun Empire really be destroyed? The Blood Emperor seemed to lose all his strength at that moment. He collapsed onto his bottom as his eyes became lost. But very soon, he stood up again, albeit shakily. He called for the people of the imperial family in a majestic hall. Very soon, over 100 people had gathered there. None of them seemed old. They were all the cream of the crop. As an everlasting empire that had existed for 1,000,000 years, the Blood Sun Empire had at least several tens of thousand members of the imperial family, yet there were only around 100 people that the Blood Emperor had called for. That was more than enough to indicate just how great their statuses were. All of them knelt on the ground politely in the majestic hall, paying their respects to the Blood Emperor. They were all unsettled and uneasy. Now, all of them knew that the Righteous Alliance was attacking the Four Symbols Alliance. The Four Symbols Alliance faced destruction and had lost several Grand Primes. The fate of the Four Symbols Alliance would directly affect the fate of their Blood Sun Empire, so these esteemed members of the imperial family basically passed every day in worry, year after year. The ninth prince, who had almost destroyed the Tian Yuan clan, happened to be among them. However, the ninth prince had already lost his vigor and haughtiness from the past. The Four Symbols Alliance won't be able to survive. The ancestral emperors have ordered us to use the bloodline plan. You are the future of our Blood Sun Empire. If the Blood Sun Empire is destroyed, there will be a day when you can rise up and rebuild our Blood Sun Empire. The Blood Emperor seemed to be in ruins. It was like he had used up all his strength to say that. Afterwards, he looked at the ninth prince and said, "The Blood Sun Empire will probably vanish, so there's no need to pay attention to the 10,000 years agreement with the Shi Empire. You should go as well. Don't disappoint your father." "Thank you for a second chance, father." The ninth prince rejoiced in excitement. "I don't care about the others, but the ninth prince must remain, or none of you will be leaving here today." At this moment, a dignified voice boomed out. A figure appeared out of nowhere in the majestic hall. He was a middle-aged man. He also wore dragon robes and possessed a dignified bearing, that of a ruler's. He did not stand on the ground. Instead, he hovered in the air, slightly higher than the Blood Emperor on the throne. He looked down on the Blood Emperor from above. The Blood Emperor's expression changed several times with the person's appearance. It became extremely sunken, but it was also became filled with powerlessness. The Blood Emperor sucked in a deep breath and said sternly, "Shi Emperor, I never thought you would actually come personally." He was the emperor of the Shi Empire, Shi Ziyan. He directly intruded upon the imperial palace of the Blood Sun Empire, appearing in this throne room in an ostentatious manner. Chapter 26:14, Gongsun Ji's arrival. Looking at the Shi Emperor, who had suddenly appeared in the throne room, all the members of the imperial family were frightened and furious at the same time. They also felt slightly aggrieved. The Blood Sun Empire and the Shi Empire were both everlasting empires on the Cloud Plain. They both possessed great territory such that they were always equally matched in terms of both strength and status. Yet now, as the emperor of the Shi Empire, the Shi Emperor had actually appeared in the sacred throne room of the Blood Sun Empire uninvited, and he wanted to cut off the Blood Sun Empire's path of retreat right from the start. This was not as simple as provocation. In the eyes of some of the people there, this had become blasphemy towards the Blood Sun Empire. As the everlasting empire that ruled over the southern region, they had now declined to a state where they would feel powerless over the Shi Emperor's direct threats. Some of the people there could not help but feel sorrow. Even the Blood Emperor felt extremely aggrieved. Shi Empire, the Righteous Alliance and the Four Symbols Alliance are at war with one another right now. As a member of the Righteous Alliance, not only has your Shi Empire not supported the Righteous Alliance, but you even have the time to interfere with minor matters of our Blood Sun Empire. Your Shi Empire really does have nothing better to do, the Blood Emperor said emotionlessly and extremely sternly. The battle in 10,000 years has to do with yours desire and faith in cultivation. It's not a small matter. The Shi Empire waved his hand, and a dragon's throne immediately appeared out of nowhere. He just sat in the seat in the air, hovering over 30 meters above the ground. Perhaps out of pure coincidence, he remained a head higher than the Blood Emperor the entire time. As for the war between the Righteous Alliance and Four Symbols Alliance, our Shi Empire no longer has to interfere. The Righteous Alliance has given our Shi Empire the order to guard the northern region. The Shi Empire spoke extremely indifferently, taking the Blood Emperor lightly. Even though they technically possessed the same status, both being emperors of everlasting empires, the Shi Empire was a chaotic prime in terms of strength, while the Blood Emperor was only an infinite prime. Moreover, he was an early infinite prime. As a result, a difference still existed between their statuses. The Blood Emperor remained silent. The war between the two alliances affected basically every major organization on the Cloud Plain. Let alone the two surviving ancestral emperors of his Blood Sun Empire, even all the chaotic primes from the everlasting empires in the eastern and western regions had been mobilized. Only the northern region had not sent a single soldiers. The Blood Emperor knew exactly what that meant. It did not mean that the Shi Empire had fallen out of favor with the Righteous Alliance. Instead, it meant the exact opposite. The Righteous Alliance was protecting the Shi Empire, preventing them from taking part so that they would not suffer casualties. Clearly, the Righteous Alliance was giving the Shi Empire special treatment due to the Tian Yuan clan. As for the ninth prince, all of his joy and excitement from earlier had completely vanished. His face was ashen, filled with despair. He knew that since the Shi Emperor had come, he definitely had no chance at leaving the Cloud Plain. His fate would be waiting for the 10,000 years to end and then fighting the princess of the Shi Empire. He even knew that he would definitely suffer defeat in the battle in 10,000 years' time. There was no chance for him to achieve victory. Even if he broke through to Infinite Prime, even if he possessed strength that could crush the princess in an overwhelming manner, he would still be the one dead in the end. Why? Why did I provoke the Tian Yuan clan? Didn't Jian Chen just want the flower of ways? I could have just given it to him. But why did I try to retaliate by attacking the Tian Yuan clan? Not just retaliate, why did I want to kill off the entire Tian Yuan clan? If I hadn't tried to kill the entire Tian Yuan clan, I wouldn't have offended the princess of the Shi Empire, and I would not be suffering a fate like this today. The ninth prince was filled with regret. At that moment, he wished so much to turn back time and redo everything. In the end, the Blood Emperor gave in. He followed through with the Shi Emperor's request, leaving the ninth prince behind. The Four Symbols Alliance was waning, so the Blood Sun Empire no longer had the confidence to confront the Shi Empire. It was also at this moment that the rarely used interplanar teleportation in a colossal city within the central city suddenly lit up. A great power surged forth, immediately attracting the attention of everyone in the surroundings. It's the interplanar teleportation formation. It's said that this teleportation formation can only be activated with color divine crystals. That's something that only primordial realm experts possess. The teleportation formation has been activated. It looks like there's going to be more people coming from other planes. They must be important. It's extremely likely for them to be primordial realm experts. Everyone move, don't block their path. The cultivators in the surroundings burst into discussion. All of them stood with their eyes wide open as they stared at the teleportation formation with deep curiosity. A few seconds later, with a powerful spatial pulse, the light in the teleportation formation subsided and revealed 4 people. The person at the lead was a young man. He wore luxurious white robes and possessed quite a striking appearance. There was uncontained arrogance on his face. The 3 others consisted of 2 middle-aged men and an old man. The 3 of them seemed much more ordinary than the white-robed young man. Their presences were completely concealed, making them look like normal mortals. However, no one believed that they were truly mortals, seeing how they had come through an interplanar teleportation formation. Cloud Plane, I've finally come. Jian-Chen, did you think you would be without worries by hiding on the Cloud Plane? The method of the exalted saint is mine. This time, I will definitely take it back and complete the legacy. The white-robed young man studied the surroundings as he muttered to himself. The white-robed young man was the current leader of the Radiant Saint Hall from the Desolate Plain, Gongsun. As for the 3 people behind Gongsun, as soon as they set foot on the Cloud Plane, they all looked at the southern region, and a gleam of light flashed through their eyes. The light was like a bolt of lightning. It was astonishing. Even the space would pulse by an undetectable amount where they looked. Just the gaze possessed unfathomable might. It really was difficult to imagine just how terrifying these 3 people were. You, come over here. Gongsun pointed at a nearby cultivator and asked coldly, tell me, where is the Tian Yuan clan founded by Jian-Chen located? The cultivator who Gongsun pointed at was only a deity. He was pale-faced and filled with unease. He arrived before Gongsun as he trembled slightly, about to speak. Leader, there's no need to ask. We already know where Jian-Chen is, said a middle-aged man behind Gongsun. The light in his eyes flickered as he stared at the southern region. He said slowly, we've come at the perfect time. There's a fascinating show going on the Cloud Plane right now. Not only have we found Jian-Chen, but even the other people from the Marshal's soul lineage are here. What? The Marshal's soul lineage is here as well? At first, Gongsun was surprised, but he immediately became overjoyed. Battle intent filled him. Although he was still a radiant god king, he had become brimming with vigor and was absolutely haughty after gaining the greatest protector sword. He completely looked down on the Marshal's soul lineage. There was indeed no reason for him to fear the Marshal's soul lineage given his possession of the protector sword. Chapter 26:15, Encounter, it really is all up to luck. Ha 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 ha. Marshal's soul lineage, I was just worrying about how I would find you, but all of you would actually be on the Cloud Plane. This is fantastic. It looks like even the heavens are helping me. Gongsun laughed aloud. Impatient, he immediately urged the 3 people behind him and said, quick, quick, quick. Go over there. Don't let them escape. Not only will I kill that traitor Jian-Chen this time and take back the method of the exalted saint, but I want the Marshal's soul lineage devastated as well. Although he knew Jian-Chen and the Marshal's soul lineage were currently on the Cloud Plane, Gongsun cultivation was only equivalent to God King. All of his senses were limited. He was unable to see what was going on in the southern region from the central region. Basically only Grand Primes and an extremely limited number of chaotic primes could do that. Don't panic, leader. The Marshal's soul lineage is currently locked in an intense battle with some other organization on the Cloud Plane. It's impossible for them to leave any time soon, said the gray-robed, skinny old man from behind Gongsun. With that, he swung his hand, and an invisible energy immediately wrapped around Gongsun. Afterwards, the two of them vanished. The two middle-aged men who had come with Gongsun stared in the direction of the southern region. Their profound gazes seemed to be able to pierce through space, allowing them to witness the battle in the southern region. Gongsun really is a little too hopeful, seeing how he wants to devastate the martial soul lineage. They're not that easy to wipe out, one of the middle-aged men said indifferently. He was called Zhiping, the ancestors of a renowned peak clan on the desolate plain, the Su family. Although the martial soul lineage has been devastated before through history, the people who did that were basically all ninth heavenly layer grand primes. Gongsun is still too young after all. His understanding of the martial soul lineage is still rather limited. He is dreaming if he wants to devastate the martial soul lineage. However, his Godslayer's sword might be able to pose some threat to the martial soul lineage, the other middle-aged man added relaxedly. He was Huangfu, the ancestors of another peak clan on the desolate plain, the Mid-Heaven clan. Both the Su family and the Mid-Heaven clan were existences that stood at the very peak of the desolate plain. Before the Radiant Saint Hall gained their protector swords, the two clans were definitely more powerful than the Radiant Saint Hall. As a matter of fact, the Su family and Mid-Heaven clan could be described as terrifying existences only second to the Celestial Sword Saint. Fortunately, the protectors of the Radiant Saint Hall aren't on the same page, or there'll be far more than just Gongsun. However, that might not be good for us, said Huangfu. The ancestor of the Su family, Zhiping, nodded. Fellow Gi, we should go as well. If we're late, we'll make that kid Gongsun unhappy. If he suddenly changes his mind and refuses to give the three other protector swords to the juniors of our clans, we'll be in for a great loss. Yeah, it's best if we do our utmost to avoid making Gongsun change his mind before we get the protector swords. Even though he's basically like a scoundrel, he is the only successor of the Tower of Radiance. For the sake of the protector swords, we'll just endure it for now, said Huangfu. With that, the two of them suddenly vanished. Deafening rumbles constantly rang out in the southern region. Terrifying pulses of energy shook up the surroundings. Every single attack from Tong Wuming, Zhou Zhidao, and Lian Wuji was devastating. They would erupt with blinding light when they struck the protective formations of the Four Symbols Alliance, causing it to shake. Now, the surroundings bore no resemblance to the past. A huge crater had appeared, and the surrounding mountains had all been flattened. I can already sense that the protective formation of the Four Symbols Alliance is weakening. It looks like they can't last for much longer, Zhou Zhidao called out eagerly and excitedly. He knew that once the protective formation was destroyed, the Four Symbols Alliance would be completely destroyed, and from then onwards, the Cloud Plain would only have a righteous alliance. Their attacks are too powerful. The formation's energy has depleted faster than we expected. We can't last much longer, Gong Ji growled from within the Four Symbols Alliance. Don't panic. I'll take action the moment the formation breaks, the young Star Lord said emotionlessly as a vicious light appeared in his eyes. With that, all the unsettled people in the Four Symbols Alliance calmed down slightly. The young Star Lord had basically become what everyone in the Four Symbols Alliance depended on. I hope the young Star Lord can really turn the tide of the battle, many people of the Four Symbols Alliance secretly prayed. At this moment, two figures appeared silently behind the Righteous Alliance. They were Gongsun and the grey-robed, skinny old man. As soon as Gongsun arrived, his expression changed slightly from the terrifying pulses of energy that shook up the surroundings. He had never seen such an intense battle and such turbulent energy. What happened here? Gongsun thought. He calmed down very soon and began to look around. He directly glanced past the Four Symbols Alliance and Righteous Alliance before locking onto the illusionary martial soul mountain that hovered in outer space. At the same time, Tong Wuming, Zhou Zhidao, and Lian Wuji sensed Gongsun arrival. They subconsciously stopped their attacks and all stared at the skinny old man. Their faces changed slightly. Third Heavenly Layer Grand Prime. Tong Wuming, Lian Wuji, and Zhou Zhidao looked at each other. They became rather stern. They could already tell the old man's strength. He was actually at the same level as the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak. It's actually Sha Yun from the Divine Blade sect. In outer space, Han Zang, Chu Jian, and Yu Zhao immediately discovered Gongsun Ji's arrival as well. They all stared at the old man and frowned. At the same time, Su Zhiping and Huangfu Gi appeared silently, standing beside the skinny old man. Their appearance immediately made Han Zang, Chu Jian, and Yu Chao become stern. Su Zhiping of the Su family and Huangfu Gi of the Mid-Heaven clan. The two of them have actually both come. This time, Han Zhang's voice was rather stern. Su Zhiping and Huangfu Gi gave them much greater pressure than Sha Yun. With that, Jian Chen looked over. He was not familiar with Sha Yun, Huangfu Gi, and Gongsun Ji, but he recognized Gongsun Ji with a single glance and sensed that the situation had taken a turn for the worse. Ha ha ha, Jian Chen, this leader of the Radiant Saint Hall has finally found you and the Marshal's soul lineage. You can't escape this time, Gongsun Ji bellowed out from below. Immediately, an extremely powerful streak of light erupted from his body. It was blinding like the sun, illuminating the surroundings. The greatest protector sword, Godslayer's sword, appeared in his hand. The sword erupted with an earth-shaking pulse of energy. It was so powerful that as soon as it appeared, it caused space to shake and warp with great intensity. The expressions of Tong Wuming, Zhou Zhidao, and Lian Wuji all changed drastically. Chapter 26:16, Gongsun Ji takes part, so powerful. Tong Wuming, Zhou Zhidao, and Lian Wuji were shocked. Their pupils shrank to the size of pins as their minds shuddered. Out of the three of them, Zhou Zhidao was a first heavenly layer Grand Prime, while Tong Wuming and Lian Wuji were both second heavenly layer Grand Primes. Such strength was basically enough for them to be ultimate existences on the cloud plane. A stomp of their feet was enough to make the entire place shake. However, the power that Gongsun Ji had erupted with was so powerful that the expressions of the three all changed, where their minds fell into turmoil. And the part that made them feel the most troubled was that the expert that had suddenly appeared and astonished them seemed to be hostile towards Jian Chen and the Marshal's soul lineage. Right now was a crucial moment in destroying the Four Symbols Alliance completely. Just when the protective formation was about to fall, just when the Four Symbols Alliance was about to be completely destroyed, such a powerful existence had suddenly appeared. As a result, Zhou Zhidao, Tong Wuming, and Lian Wuji's expressions became rather ugly. At that moment, all the experts they had brought with them stopped attacking the Four Symbols Alliance. Gongsun Ji wielded Godslayer's sword as he basked in dazzling light, illuminating the surroundings in a godlike manner. He turned into a streak of light and flew into outer space. Before he had even approached the Marshal's Soul Mountain, he had already slashed out with his sword. Immediately, the astonishing power in Godslayer's sword suddenly erupted. It made the world pale and the stars dim. The icy, dark space seemed to be cut in half by that slash. A huge, pitch-black crack appeared, devouring all light. As Godslayer's sword was swung, a terrifying streak of light shot towards the Marshal's Soul Mountain with unbelievable speed, earth-shaking power, and devastating presence. Wherever the streak of light passed by, the cold, dark space would shake violently. Swathes of space would warp and collapse. The power in the slash had reached the limit. It had surpassed what the space there could endure, so even the slightest pulse was enough to make the space shake. There's nothing to worry about with Gongsun Ji. He wields Godslayer's sword, but his cultivation is just too low. He's unable to wield the power of the sword perfectly. As such, he can't harm us as long as we're careful, Yu Chao said sternly from the Mountain Soul. With that, he changed the location of the Mountain Soul. When the Mountain Soul moved, it was as fast as teleportation. In the blink of an eye, the Mountain Soul had shifted 10,000 kilometers from its original location. Although the astonishing attack from Gongsun Ji was utterly devastating, it did not seem to be able to lock onto the Marshal's Soul Mountain. As a result, the attack completely missed as the Marshal's Soul Mountain had moved. It vanished into the depths of space in the end. Gongsun Ji produced a furious bellow. He continued his attacks, where every swing erupted with destructive might. However, the marshal's soul mountain did not receive them forcefully. They managed to dodge it with ease every time. Seeing how his attacks were dodged time and time again, Gongsun finally could not stand it anymore. He bellowed out, "Marshal's soul lineage, if you have the courage, don't run. Face me in open battle." Jianchen stared at Gongsun from the mountain soul as he frowned as well. If Gongsun did not possess a protector sword, he would only be an ant-like existence in his eyes. However, he had to admit that this puny god king was beyond what he could handle now that he possessed a protector sword. But it seems like only Gongsun of the 6 protectors of the Radiant Saint Hall are here. Jianchen glanced past the cloud plain. When he failed to find Biyao and Han Xian, he was relieved. The wielders of the protector swords should be completely up to the artifact spirit to choose, or it would be impossible for junior Biyao and teacher Han Xian to receive them. After all, there are far too many people who are stronger than them in the Radiant Saint Hall. It looks like I need to find a way to pay a visit to the Tower of Radiance, thought Jianchen. Back in the Tower of Radiance, Gongsun had demonstrated hostility and killing intent towards him. The artifact spirit should have known this, but the most powerful protector sword still ended up in Gongsun hands. As a result, he sensed something was off and could not help but worry for the artifact spirit. First senior brother, second senior brother, I've personally experienced the might of protector swords. As a result, my understanding towards them eclipses yours. Let me handle Gongsun. Be careful of Hangfu Gi and Zhiping. They've come with Gongsun, so they must be working with him, Yu Chao said sternly. With that, he directly flew away from the mountain soul. All his energy surged as he charged right towards Gongsun. Gongsun seemed to become the only sun in the dark space as he held his protector sword. He shone with resplendent light, illuminating the entire cloud plain. He called out furiously and swung his sword mercilessly, cleaving through the galaxies right towards Yu Chao. Yu Chao dared not be careless as he faced the power of the protector sword. He was stern, refusing to receive Gongsun attack openly. Instead, he dodged them with great agility. Afterwards, Yu Chao and Gongsun engaged in a dogfight. Actually, it was more like a game of cat and mouse, as Yu Chao had a deep understanding of the protector sword's power. He did not try to take on Gongsun attacks, nor did he counterattack. He just dodged. If he took on the attacks, only he would suffer as the protector sword was just too powerful. If he counterattacked, Gongsun was protected by the protector swords. The power could even block martial soul force, so no attacks could harm Gongsun at all unless they could destroy the power from Godslayer's sword. As a result, dodging was the only way to deal with protector swords when the strength for an open battle was missing. However, as Gongsun struck out constantly, he discovered that while he did have Godslayer's sword, he failed to even touch Yu Chao's clothes. He could not help but become annoyed. Ha ha ha, does you martial soul lineage only know how to run before me? The renowned martial soul lineage that has existed since the ancient times does not even have the right to fight me. What cowards! I think there's no need for the martial soul lineage to exist anymore. You should be Yu Chao. Yu Chao, you infiltrated our Radiant Saint Hall last time and almost died to my hands. I never thought that you would just start running as soon as you saw me this time. Did you learn my strength from your wounds last time such that you developed fear towards me? Where you don't even have the courage to fight, ha ha ha, martial soul lineage, since you fear me so much, I'll give you a chance to live. If you hand over Jian Chen's head then kneel and bow your heads 9 times before me, I'll let you live. Having run out of options, Gongsun started insulting them verbally. His attacks from Godslayer's sword were indeed devastating, but they could not touch Yu Chao, so he felt extremely aggrieved. He felt like he was punching cotton, completely dissatisfying. It was a horrible feeling. After all, he was just a god king. He was nowhere close to a chaotic prime in all aspects. Even with a protector sword, his attacks completely lacked the spirit that they should possess. They could not lock onto Yu Chao. Many times, he could not even hit Yu Chao's shadow. Whenever Yu Chao changed his position, he would have to fling his head about to look for him. This was the disadvantage of possessing power that did not match up to one's cultivation. If the protector's sword ended up in the hands of someone with a closer cultivation, every single strike could entrap the opponent firmly. It would completely lock onto them such that they could not dodge at all. Gongsun Ji's cultivation is still a little too weak. He's just far too slow with his attacks. It really is a waste that such a powerful Godslayer's sword has ended up in his hands. On the cloud plain, Huangfu Gi, Su Zhiping, and Sha Yun stared at the battle in outer space and secretly shook their heads. However, this is only temporary. Gongsun Ji is under the protection of the Protector Sword. There's only a handful of people who can breach the protection and kill him, so he will mature in the end. As his strength constantly increases, he will become more and more terrifying, said the skinny old man, Sha Yun. Chapter 26:17. Su Zhiping takes part. Huangfu Gi and Su Zhiping nodded. They agreed with Sha Yun's words very much. We have to properly support Gongsun Ji before he completely matures. We have to let him understand that our Mid-Heaven clan, Su family, and Divine Blade sect completely stand with him. Only when he treats us as the only people he can trust will he be willing to give the 3 remaining protector swords to the juniors of our organizations without worry. The protector swords are so powerful such that we can't afford to miss out on them, said Huangfu Gi. The protectors of the Radiant Saint Hall don't have harmonious relationships with one another. Bai Yu, Han Xian, and Dong Lin Yanxue form one group. The father-son duo, Xian Zhan and Xian Ming, do not seem to take a stance. They seem to be neutral. Although Gongsun Ji possesses the most powerful protector sword, he's alone. At a time like this, he needs people he can trust. Our 3 organizations can serve as what he can rely on the most. Aside from the Celestial Sword Saint, there's probably no other organization that can fend off the 3 of us combined on the desolate plain. As a result, the 3 remaining protector swords are definitely ours, Su Zhiping said confidently. This was confidence that came from great strength, as no other peak organization on the desolate plain could contend with his Su family aside from the Mid-Heaven clan. Their Su family possessed 2 Grand Primes. Apart from Su Zhiping, there was a second Heavenly Layer Grand Prime. At the same time, the Gentle Breeze ancestor, Wu Lu, Gong Ji, Qingfeng Yun, and He Dao stood together in the protective formations of the 4 Symbols Alliance. They hovered high in the air as their eyes shone with excited light. They stared right at outer space. I never thought the enemies of the Martial Soul lineage would actually come at a time like this. This is fantastic. This is utterly fantastic. It looks like even the heavens are assisting us, Gong Ji said excitedly. She looked at Gongsun Ji, who was fighting against Yu Chao in outer space. Although she did not recognize Gongsun Ji, she had begun treating him as the person who had saved her life. It looks like the threat of the Martial Soul lineage has been resolved. I really never thought that 2 experts like this would appear on our cloud plane, the Gentle Breeze ancestor added. He stared at Huangfu Gi, Su Zhiping, and Shang Yun and became rather stern. 2 of them are 4th Heavenly Layer Grand Primes. Either one of the 2 are more powerful than the Heavenless Demon Exalt. What? 2 4th Heavenly Layer Grand Primes? He Dao was surprised when he heard that, and he could not help but cry out. Afterwards, he began to ravish with joy. At the same time, the treasured members of the Blood Sun Empire were about to retreat under the Blood Emperor's secret arrangements. They wanted to flee the cloud plane to avoid this crisis and preserve some survivors. The Shi Emperor did not leave. Instead, he remained in the throne room that represented great authority in the Blood Sun Empire with great composure. It was as if he wanted to prevent the 9th prince from slipping away during the retreat. The Blood Emperor's expression was frigid and terrifyingly sunken the entire time. The Shi Emperor's actions severely challenged the dignity of the Blood Sun Empire. He did not take the Blood Sun Empire seriously at all, so he made the Blood Emperor furious. However, their remaining 2 ancestral emperors were both in the headquarters of the 4 Symbols Alliance, ready to fight in a battle to the death against the Righteous Alliance. The current Blood Sun Empire did not possess anyone who could fend off the Shi Emperor with his cultivation as a chaotic prime. As a result, the Blood Emperor could only yield to the pressure from the Shi Emperor. However, at this moment, Gongsun Ji and the martial soul lineage's battle attracted the attention of the Shi Emperor and the Blood Emperor. The Shi Emperor suddenly frowned and immediately looked at outer space. He gradually became stern. As for the Blood Emperor, he completely changed from his previously gloomy demeanor. His face lit up as he looked at outer space with shining eyes. Even though he was unable to see everything as clearly as the Shi Emperor, he was still able to see some things. Ha ha ha, it looks like the martial soul lineage has quite a few enemies in the Saints' world. They're proactively looking trouble with the martial soul lineage, so it looks like the martial soul lineage's opponents are nothing but extraordinary. The Blood Emperor laughed aloud. All his gloom had vanished. With such a sudden change in the situation, who do you think will be the final victor now, Shi Emperor? The Blood Emperor looked at the Shi Emperor mysteriously. He felt uncontainable satisfaction when he saw how stern the Shi Emperor had become. The outcome of the battle between the two alliances directly affected the fates of their two everlasting empires. Senior Huangfu, Senior Su, Senior Sha, what are you waiting for? Trap down this person quickly. He escaped last time. I have to kill him personally this time. At this moment, Gongsun Ji's vexed voice rang out from outer space. Don't worry, leader, we'll come help you right now. Su Zhiping laughed aloud. He finally stopped holding back. His cultivation erupted violently, immediately forming a terrifying storm of energy that caused the ground to crack and the mountains to tremble. It made the expressions of Tong Wuming, Lian Wuji, and Zhou Zhidao all change drastically. The fourth heavenly layer. A grand prime of the fourth heavenly layer. The three of them cried out as their faces became extremely ugly. The fourth heavenly layer was mid-grand prime. This difference was definitely greater than the difference between the first heavenly layer and the second heavenly layer, or the second heavenly layer and the third heavenly layer. Across all these years, the Cloud Plane only had a single mid-grand prime expert, the Heavenless Demon Exalt of the Tian Empire. Even though the Heavenless Demon Exalt was already dead, everyone still remembered his influence. Now that an expert on the same level as the Heavenless Demon Exalt had appeared here, the hearts of the experts from the Righteous Alliance all sank. On the Martial Soul Mountain, Han Zang and Chu Jian became stern as well. Naturally, there was no reason for them to fear Su Zhiping and Huangfu Gi on any other day, but they were wrapped up in a battle with the Four Symbols Alliance right now. If these two took part, many unknown variables would appear. Su Zhiping, Huangfu Gi, Sha Yun, your three organizations have always been uninvolved with the matters of our martial soul lineage. Why must your three organizations get involved just because of Gongsun Ji? Han Zang said sternly. Han Zang, speak no more. In the past, we were unwilling to offend your martial soul lineage because the price would be far too great. However, it's different now. Your martial soul lineage will become a matter of the past, Su Zhiping said indifferently. He took a step and immediately appeared in outer space. Erupting with terrifying energy, he directly sent a palm strike towards Yu Chao. Chapter 26:18. Han Zang injured Su Zhiping used his full strength right from the start, completely unleashing his cultivation as a fourth heavenly layer Grand Prime. With his palm strike, the stars dimmed and galaxies were destroyed. The dark space had been pierced. It was truly devastating. Su Zhiping clearly felt no reluctance towards becoming complete enemies with the martial soul lineage as he crossed the point of no return. He tried to kill as soon as he struck out, aiming to claim Yu Chao's life on the spot. So powerful. Tong Wuming, Zhou Zhidao, and Lian Wuji hovered high above the cloud plane. They tilted their heads and looked at what was happening in outer space. They were all extremely stern. In particular, their hearts shivered when they witnessed Su Zhiping's strength. As all of this happened, the Lord of the Heavens Linked Peak had already become completely green on the Heavens Linked Peak. These were clearly signs of the curse spreading. Even though the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak forcefully suppressed it with his cultivation as a peak 3rd heavenly layer Grand Prime, he could only reduce the rate at which it spread to buy some more time for himself. The Lord of the Heavens Link Peak stood on the Heavens Link Peak as he stared at outer space. His face was filled with worry. This Zhiping is so powerful. His battle prowess has completely exceeded the heavenless demon Exalt. Even among 4th heavenly layer Grand Primes, Zhiping probably ranks towards the top. It'll be problematic now. Although the martial soul lineage is known to possess unmatched battle prowess, their personal cultivation levels are just too low. They can't deal with 4th heavenly layer Grand Primes at all, the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak said in worry. He wanted to help, but he was already busy enough himself. He was in no state to provide assistance. It'll be interesting now. The greatest help the Righteous Alliance has is the martial soul lineage, but now it looks like the martial soul lineage can't even protect themselves. The Blood Emperor stared at outer space excitedly. His current emotions could no longer be put into words. Hold on. Don't leave yet. We still don't know who will emerge as the victor in the very end. Perhaps our Blood Sun Empire will become the only everlasting empire on the cloud plane before long. The Blood Emperor stopped the members of the imperial family who were about to be teleported away. He looked at the Shi Emperor in a provoking manner as he laughed aloud. His mood was extremely great. Meanwhile, in the Shi Empire in the northern region, their 2 ancestral emperors, Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming, hovered in the air. They stared at outer space sternly. Aside from the 2 of them, the Zihao Empire in the eastern region, the Jinjian Empire in the western region, and all other organizations and primordial realm experts across the 5 regions paid close attention to the battle in outer space. All of them understood that this battle did not determine something as simple as the future distribution of power on the cloud plane. It determined their fates as well. Aside from the Pingtian Empire and the Heavenly Moon Empire on the current cloud plane, basically all other organizations had been absorbed into the 4 Symbols Alliance or the Righteous Alliance. As soon as one of the alliances fell, all the organizations under the alliance would face the threat of destruction. In the past, there was no need for everyone to be as worried as right now, as 4 of the 5 regions belonged to the Righteous Alliance. The Righteous Alliance had a crushing advantage over the 4 Symbols Alliance. But it was different now. With the entry of the experts from the Desolate Plain, the Righteous Alliance that was supposed to emerge victorious was now facing great danger. This naturally weighed on all of their minds. The expressions of everyone from the martial soul lineage changed when they saw Zhiping attack Yuxiao. Martial soul array. As the strongest expert of the martial soul lineage, Zang immediately bellowed out. Before he had even finished talking, he shot off like a bolt of lightning. His presence surged as he charged right towards Zhiping. Powerful energy gathered on his body. Even martial soul force secretly began to surge. At that moment, Zang was ready to risk his life, as the martial soul array needed time to reach completion. Although it would take a very short amount of time, he clearly could not afford to wait for it. As a result, Zang could only use his personal strength to forcefully receive Zhiping's strike. He was facing a 4th heavenly layer Grand Prime's attack as a 9th heavenly layer Chaotic Prime. Be careful, senior brother. Yu Chao immediately warned him when he saw Zang's actions. Worry filled his eyes. Zhiping's strength could not be compared to regular 4th heavenly layer Grand Primes. He and Huangfu Gi were both experts who ranked towards the top in their level of cultivation. They were supreme prodigies when they were young. As such, even though they could not claim that they were invincible among the same level of cultivation, they were not far from it. That works as well. Zang, allow me to witness just how powerful the person who is known as the strongest in the martial soul lineage is. Zhiping remained calm as if he did not fear the martial soul lineage much at all. He was only worried because he had a large organization behind him, which tied him down. With that, Zhiping's palm strike that originally targeted Yu Chao shot towards Zang. With a rumble, the space there shattered. The palm strike seemed to lock down the entire space, completely enveloping Zang such that he could not dodge. Immediately, Han Zang felt like a mountainous pressure, as if the entire world weighed on his body. However, he was no regular ninth heavenly layer chaotic prime. His comprehension remained at the ninth heavenly layer of chaotic prime, but his cultivation had completely defied logic and reached grand prime. Even though it was only the first heavenly layer of grand prime, it was a colossal difference from the ninth heavenly layer of chaotic prime. Han Zang also struck out with his hand. The palm strike condensed his vital energies and contained his peak strength. The attack was extraordinary. As soon as he struck out, the world would fade and souls would shake. Tremendous martial soul force gathered in the palm strike, affecting the souls of people. Bang! A devastating boom exploded in the shattered space. Zhiping and Han Zhang's hands collided like two colossal planets, erupting with a devastating pulse of energy that caused space to tremor. Spurt. Blood sprayed out from Han Zhang's mouth as he was knocked away like a bolt of lightning. His blue robes had already been ravaged to dust by the violent energy, revealing the black armor inside. The armor rapidly flickered as it dimmed quickly. The armor was a god artifact, and a medium-quality god artifact at that. It had an extremely sturdy defense. However, even with that being the case, Han Zang was still injured by Zhiping's palm strike. Chapter 26:19. The might of the array. As Zhiping stood in space, the presence he emitted was utterly astonishing. He gave off the terrifying pressure of a fourth heavenly layer grand prime, startling all the experts on the cloud plane. He stared at Han Zang coldly as the latter flew back, and a strange light appeared in his eyes. He said in an extremely indifferent tone, "I did not hold back at all with my palm strike. You received it with just your strength, yet you only suffered from some slight injuries. The martial soul lineage really does deserve its reputation for its strength. Unfortunately, the difference in our cultivation is just too great. It's impossible for you to be my opponent." With that, Zhiping took a step and crossed through space, appearing before Han Zang like he had teleported. Raising his hand, he struck towards Han Zang with terrifying power. With the palm strike, the space around Han Zang seemed to compress. Zhiping's attack possessed a mysterious power, making the space around Han Zang seize up in an attempt to restrain Han Zang. At that moment, Han Zang felt immobilized. His movements were restricted. After all, Zhiping was just too powerful. Even though his battle prowess was not on par with fifth heavenly layer grand primes, he was extremely outstanding among the fourth heavenly layer. Han Zang was clearly on a much lower level compared to Zhiping. However, at this moment, a tremendous power immediately transferred through space through a method that no one could sense, pouring into Han Zhang's body. The martial soul array was finally complete. The power from Chu Jian, Yun Ziding, Su Qi, Bai Rufeng, Qing Shan, and Jian Chen fused together perfectly through the martial soul array. It tied their vital energies and cultivation together, stacking onto Han Zang with the power from the mountain soul. This was a unique secret technique of the martial soul lineage. It was extremely profound. The power could be transferred through space such that even if they were quite far away from Han Zang, the connection would not be affected at all. No one could sever it. As soon as the martial soul array was completed, Han Zhang's presence exploded. In just that short instance, his presence had risen to a level where it did not pale in comparison to Zhiping at all. It was only stronger. If it were just the power from the six of them, it would have been impossible for Han Zang to reach such a level even when they combined perfectly. However, there was the power from the mountain soul. That made all the difference. As a result, not only was the power of the six other successors gathered on Han Zang, but there was also power from the mountain soul. After Han Zang gained such great power, Zhiping could no longer keep him trapped. The pressure on him immediately vanished, and he punched out. The martial soul array. At the same time, a gleam of light flashed through Zhiping's eyes. The martial soul lineage had been in conflict with the Radiant Saint Hall for so many years, and they had once clashed with the many experts of the Desolate Plain in order to save Jian Chen. As a result, he was not unfamiliar with the martial soul array. Zhiping's attack remained the same, possessing the same suppressive might as before. However, his presence suddenly rose, becoming even more powerful. At the same time, the laws of the world revolved around him, causing him to suddenly shine with blinding and scorching light. At that moment, his hand became surrounded by light as well. As if a sun had been compressed in his hand, it shone with dazzling light, illuminating the dark cosmos. Boom! With a violent rumble, Hun Zhang's terrifying punch directly collided with Su Zhiping's hand. Space collapsed. This time, Su Zhiping did not manage to knock Hun Zhang away like before. Instead, he was the one who was knocked away. The dazzling light on his body rapidly faded as his expression became very ugly. Not only has the martial soul array increased your strength, but it has strengthened your martial soul force as well. Your martial soul force could not affect me at all before, let alone harm me, but now it can harm my soul, Su Zhiping said with a growl. His soul had received quite the impact when he clashed with Hun Zhang. He was unable to defend against it at all. Su Zhiping looked at the cloud plane and called out, Huang Fugi, let's fight Hun Zhang together. Sha Yun, deal with the martial soul mountain. Interfere with them and find a way to disrupt their martial soul array. It's time for us to take action. Huang Fugi smiled on the cloud plane. With that, he suddenly vanished and appeared next to Su Zhiping. No problem. Leave the martial soul mountain to me, called out the ancestor of the divine blade sect, Sha Yun. His presence erupted. He happened to be at the peak of the third heavenly layer of Grand Prime. Sha Yun was extremely powerful as well. Even though he was not as great as Su Zhiping and Huang Fugi, he was only a step away from the fourth heavenly layer. He directly appeared outside the mountain soul. A brutal blade intent surged as a blade appeared in his hand. He gave off cold killing intent as he slashed his blade at the mountain soul in an unstoppable manner. As he slashed out, a silver streak of light appeared in the air. It was tiny, but it was also devastating. Wherever it passed by, space was cut open like paper. The streak of light was clearly a combination of blade intent and blade chi. Sha Yun had already attained a great level of mastery over the way of the blade, so the power in his attack was completely condensed into a single streak, multiplying the power as a result. Hun Zhang ignored Sha Yun. He did not even look at Sha Yun as he attacked the mountain soul, as if he did not care at all. Even the people on the mountain soul did not pay attention to Sha Yun. Boom! With an astonishing sound, Sha Yun's attack struck the energy barrier around the mountain soul with brutal power. However, it only made the energy barrier twist slightly. Sha Yun's eyes turned cold. He was not surprised at all. He continued his attacks with his blade. He knew that the illusionary martial soul mountain was only condensed from tremendous energy. It was not the true martial soul mountain. He was depleting this energy with his attacks. Huang Fugi glanced in the direction of the mountain soul and said, in the past, the martial soul mountain could even endure attacks from the heavenly king of azure brilliance for a while. Although the heavenly king of azure brilliance is at the fourth heavenly layer just like us, his bloodline as a divine beast is so powerful that he can even kill some regular fifth heavenly layer grand primes. Even the heavenly king of azure brilliance could not get through the martial soul mountain quickly, so it's even more impossible for Sha Yun. Sha Yun isn't enough to disrupt them. After a slight pause, Huang Fugi continued, Su Zhiping, your laws of the sun are better suited for getting through formations. Attack the martial soul mountain with Sha Yun. Leave Hun Zhang to me. Chapter 26-20, The Tides Turn Again. Su Zhiping nodded and said, all right. Be careful of Hun Zhang's martial soul force. That kind of power is just too damaging to the soul, and you can't block it either. Especially after the martial soul array has been completed, the martial soul force has reached a level where it can even harm you and me. With that, Su Zhiping shot off and arrived before the mountain soul in an instant. At this moment, Sha Yun wielded his blade as a brutal blade intent condensed around him. He constantly launched attacks at the mountain soul. Immediately, the space there was filled with blade chi. Strands of sharp, overbearing blade intent permeated the area as they cut through space, creating densely packed cracks throughout the entire region. The cracks were extremely tiny, but they were like rain, enveloping the entire mountain soul. Moreover, that was just the influence from the blade intent. If Sha Yun personally attacked with his weapon, the power could split the world and shatter galaxies. Rise, sun. At the same time, Zhiping stood before the mountain soul and called out. The cold, dark space suddenly became filled with scorching heat as a bright light rose up from Zhiping. The light grew more and more intense, more and more scorching. In less than a few seconds, the light on Zhiping had reached an indescribable level, and the terrifying heat made space constantly twist. At that moment, Zhiping seemed like he had become a sun, illuminating the dark cosmos. The intense light and scorching heat directly reached the cloud plain as if the sweltering summer had arrived. No, it was even more terrifying than the scorching summer sun. The light alone blinded countless low-level cultivators on the cloud plain. Even godhood cultivators struggled to keep their eyes open, and some infinite primes even felt a stabbing pain in their eyes, making them no longer dare to just look at the sky. That was the light alone, so just how terrifying the heat was went without saying. Under the heat, countless low-level cultivators fled for their lives. They found various holes and places to hide in. All the plants withered at a visible rate as signs of life vanished. This was Zhiping's laws of the sun. He had become the sun, except he was far more terrifying than the real sun. Martial Soul Mountain, I would like to see how long you can last under my laws of the sun. Zhiping's voice rang out from the blinding radiance. In the next moment, the sun around him immediately began to swell, reaching the size of a planet and directly enveloping the mountain soul. Immediately, the mountain soul vanished. It had been swallowed up by the planetoid sun condensed from the laws of the sun. The sun was like a prison, keeping the Martial Soul Mountain firmly trapped. The laws of the sun surged in its interior. They had almost become tangible, becoming surging solar flames that burned at the mountain's soul with terrifying power. Zhiping sat at the center of this colossal sun. He used his comprehension of the laws of the sun to constantly condense the power of the sun and replenish the losses that the sun had sustained. Zhiping was unable to forcefully break through the defenses of the mountain soul, so he chose the method of rapidly depleting its power to get through it. In other words, he chose this method to interfere with the Martial Soul lineage's Martial Soul array. However, Zhiping's actions did not affect the interior of the mountain soul at all. The dazzling light and terrifying heat failed to get inside. All the light and all the heat was blocked and kept outside by the energy barrier from the mountain soul. None of it managed to pass through. However, Zhiping's actions really did take a heavy toll on the energy of the mountain soul. To another side, the ancestor of the Mid-Heaven clan, Huangfu had already begun fighting with Zang. Huangfu comprehended the laws of slaughter, so his every strike condensed the power of slaughter. It ripped through the world and was extremely dangerous. He was embroiled in an intense battle against Zang. The Martial Soul lineage can't even protect themselves now. This is the perfect opportunity to destroy the Righteous Alliance. Open the formations, then everyone attack. Just as the experts of the Desolate Plain were locked in combat with the Martial Soul lineage, the Four Symbols Alliance that had only been defending earlier made use of this rare opportunity to launch a counterattack. Immediately, the protective formations of the Four Symbols Alliance opened up, and all the experts gathered inside charged out, embroiling in a battle against the three organizations of the Righteous Alliance. The Gentle Breeze ancestor, Gong Ji, Wu Lu, Changfeng Yun, and He Dao immediately surrounded Tong Wuming, Lian Wuji, and Zhou Zhidao. They all unleashed their full power to try and kill the three of them. Immediately, the Righteous Alliance completely lost the upper hand. Tong Wuming, Lian Wuji, and Zhou Zhidao were not the opponents of the 5 Grand Primes from the Four Symbols Alliance. Not only did the Grand Primes from the Four Symbols Alliance possess a numerical advantage, but they even had an expert like the Gentle Breeze ancestor. The battle only lasted for a short while before Tong Wuming, Lian Wuji, and Zhou Zhidao all became wounded. As for the forces from the three organizations, they suffered heavy casualties. The formations fell one after another, and members and disciples of the Tong family, Fire God clan, and Cosmic sect were torn to pieces. Victory now tilted towards the Four Symbols Alliance. After the Righteous Alliance lost the God's Fallen clan, Daoist sect of Emergence, and the Heavenquaking sect, both their peak powers and the majority of their forces could no longer match up to the Four Symbols Alliance. Retreat! Retreat! Tong Wuming, Zhou Zhidao, and Lian Wuji ordered a retreat in a hurry. Without the support of the Martial Soul lineage, they were not the Four Symbols Alliance's opponent. Zhou Zhidao, my Daoist sect of Emergence was destroyed by you. You killed so many disciples of my sect, so how can I let you escape today? He Dao ground his teeth. Hatred filled his eyes as he stabbed his sword through Zhou Zhidao's chest, causing him to constantly cough up blood. At the same time, there was a flash, and Wu Lu struck out. He cut off Zhou Zhidao's right arm, causing the blood of the Grand Prime to spray into the air. Zhou Zhidao was the weakest out of the three experts of the Righteous Alliance. He was only a first heavenly layer Grand Prime. As such, when he faced the combined attacks of He Dao and Wu Lu, who were at the first and second heavenly layers respectively, it was impossible for him to last very long. Pale-faced, Zhou Zhidao was defeated. He began to flee from the southern region. Tong Wuming and Lian Wuji struggled to remain unscathed as well. They were covered in blood as they also began to retreat in defeat. Chapter 26-21, The Decisions of the Empires. As Tong Wuming, Zhou Zhidao, and Lian Wuji retreated in defeat, the elite forces they had brought from their three organizations suffered heavy losses as well. They retreated under the attacks of the Four Symbols Alliance, and in just a short moment, several primordial realm experts fell. The Four Symbols Alliance had launched an all-out offense. They used all the forces of the Alliance without holding back at all. It was not just Godhood elites and primordial realm experts. Even Origin realm and Sainthood cultivators took part in the battle. Even though they were weak, they could unleash power beyond their cultivation when they fell into formations together. As a result, the cultivators that surged out of the Four Symbols Alliance were like a flood. There were so many of them that there were at least 2 or 3 million. On the other hand, the Righteous Alliance had never expected experts to come from the desolate plain, so they had only brought their elites to minimize their casualties. They were all at Godhood at the very least. They only had around 200,000 people across the three organizations, so they were obviously at a numerical disadvantage. They did not even have as many Godhood cultivators or primordial realm experts as the Four Symbols Alliance. If the Martial Soul lineage had not been pinned down, they would have had more than enough power to deal with the Four Symbols Alliance. However, the Martial Soul lineage was already struggling to deal with their own predicament, so they were unable to provide any assistance at all. Ever since the betrayal, the Righteous Alliance's strength had plummeted. It was impossible for them to be the Four Symbols Alliance's opponent. Great Elder! At this moment, a sorrowful cry rang out. The head of a chaotic prime Great Elder from the Righteous Alliance had exploded from a punch. His soul failed to escape, so he directly died there. 2 chaotic primes from the Four Symbols Alliance had killed him. They worked together to successfully kill someone during this period of time. At the same time, Lian Wuji roared furiously as he retreated. His voice was filled with grief. The chaotic prime who had died was a Great Elder of the Fire God clan. Losing such an expert was a heavy loss to any peak organization on the Cloud Plane. No one hold back. Use your full strength. Kill, kill, kill them all, an old voice boomed out. It was filled with evident fury and killing intent. A chaotic prime Great Elder from the Four Symbols Alliance called out. His eyes were bloodshot as gave this ruthless command. During the past few days, the Four Symbols Alliance could only hide in their protective formation and wait for their deaths under the combined efforts of the Righteous Alliance and the Martial Soul lineage. They could not afford to take a single step out, as leaving meant death. As a result, the entire Four Symbols Alliance was extremely vexed. They felt aggrieved and were filled with the fear towards death. Now that the tides had turned, and they finally saw a glimmer of hope in the darkness of death, all of them valued this opportunity very much. They all used their full strength to rapidly enlarge this glimmer of hope that they had obtained after so much difficulty. In contrast to the Four Symbols Alliance, which basically unleashed 120% of their strength, the Righteous Alliance's morale was low. They fought as they fled, and their casualties rapidly increased. Ha ha ha, Shi Emperor, it looks like the situation of your Righteous Alliance has taken a turn for the worse. The Righteous Alliance has begun running. They're not the Four Symbols Alliance's opponent. In the Imperial Palace of the Blood Sun Empire, the Blood Emperor was overjoyed. He was extremely happy. He had almost begun dancing in joy. The Righteous Alliance seems to have lost a chaotic prime. The battle is just too intense. It's basically the final battle to the death between the two alliances. Shi Emperor, it's best if you take part in something like this. The Blood Emperor acted like he was trying to persuade the Shi Emperor, but he was actually scoffing at him. The Shi Emperor said nothing. He took a step and immediately vanished, leaving the Blood Sun Empire. He used his speed as a chaotic prime to cross through the southern region and quickly returned to the Shi Empire. The two other chaotic primes of the Shi Empire, Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming, had already emerged from seclusion. They gathered together sternly. The Shi Emperor directly appeared before the two of them. He was stern as well. Ziyun, you're the Emperor of the Shi Empire. What do you think we should do about this? Shi Haoshuan asked sternly. Not only was he the ancestral emperor and ancestor of the Shi Empire, but he was also the Shi Emperor's father. Sound the war drums. Gather all the experts of the Shi Empire and ready all armies for war. Immediately summon experts from all the organizations and sects in the Shi Empire to gather in the imperial capital. Immediately summon experts from all the ancient empires, divine kingdoms, and so on in the northern region to gather in the imperial capital. As soon as the Shi Emperor returned, he passed down order after order as the Emperor of the Shi Empire. Every single order was an imperial edict and was carried out as quickly as possible. Not only did it reach the organizations of various sizes in the Shi Empire, but even the independent ancient empires had received the Shi Emperor's edict. Immediately, the entire northern region was shaken up. The Shi Emperor used his actions to show his decision. He planned on gathering the power of the entire northern region to fight alongside the Righteous Alliance. At this moment, the current emperor of the Zhihao Empire in the eastern region passed down the same orders as the Shi Emperor. The entire eastern region immediately began to surge. The three chaotic primes of the Zhihao Empire all emerged from seclusion. They were extremely stern as they said with authority, "At a time like this, we cannot retreat. We can only face everything courageously and assist the Righteous Alliance against the Four Symbols Alliance. After all, if the Righteous Alliance is defeated or destroyed, our Zhihao Empire will face a terrible fate. Our Zhihao Empire will rise and fall with the Righteous Alliance." The two ancestral emperors stood atop the imperial palace of the Jinjian Empire. They stared at the southern region deeply. Ancestral emperors, do we mobilize our experts to provide support? The emperor of the Jinjian Empire stood politely beside the ancestral emperors and asked carefully. There's no need to hurry. The Righteous Alliance is at an inferior position right now. If no accidents happen, they will definitely suffer defeat. The martial soul lineage has encountered powerful opponents, and they're already struggling with their own predicament. As such, the distribution of power on the cloud plane will probably undergo an upheaving change. If we take the wrong side, what awaits us is destruction. We should just observe and not take any actions just yet. We should make our decision at the final moment, an ancestral emperor of the Jinjian Empire said sternly. Chapter 26-22, Assaulting the Martial Soul Mountain. It was also at this moment that the everlasting empires in the eastern, northern, and western regions made their decisions simultaneously. As powerful emperors that reigned over an entire region, their decisions could affect all the organizations in their respective region. Among the three regions, the Shi Empire and the Zhihao Empire had already mobilized, gathering their forces against the Four Symbols Alliances. The Jinjian Empire chose a different route from the eastern and northern regions. As a member of the Righteous Alliance, they chose to remain quiet instead. They did nothing. In outer space, the sun condensed from Zhiping's laws of the sun radiated with dazzling light and terrifying heat. Its effects on the cloud plane rapidly weakened. This was because their battle location in outer space constantly shifted as they constantly moved away from the cloud plane. After reaching a certain point, the influence from the laws of the sun on the cloud plane would decrease. Zhiping currently sat within the huge sun as he stared at the mountain soul. As time went on, he gradually frowned. Just how much energy is in the martial soul mountain? It is under the constant attack of my laws of the sun, but its energy hasn't decreased much at all, thought Zhiping. After a moment of thought, he looked at Gongsun, who was being led around like a dog by Yu Chao. He called out, "Leader, don't waste any more time with him. The difference between your cultivations is far too great. If he doesn't want to fight with you, you can't catch up to him. I've already trapped the Martial Soul Mountain, so hurry up and come over to attack the Martial Soul Mountain with your protector sword." The Martial Soul Mountain definitely won't be able to last much longer given the might of the protector sword. When he heard Zhiping's words, Gongsun's eyes suddenly lit up as he hunted Yu Chao down. He immediately abandoned Yu Chao and flew towards the Martial Soul Mountain. Yu Chao hovered in the distance. As he watched Gongsun fly towards the Martial Soul Mountain, he immediately guessed Gongsun's intentions. His expression suddenly changed. Oh no, he's trying to attack the mountain soul. The protector sword poses a much greater threat than both Zhiping and Yun. The mountain soul probably won't be able to last very long. Yu Chao's heart sank. He immediately pursued Gongsun in an attempt to stop him from approaching the mountain soul. Yu Chao, weren't you pretty good at running before? You didn't even want to make contact with me. Now that I'm about to attack the Martial Soul Mountain, you've finally begun to panic. However, it's useless even if you panic now. Once I destroy your Martial Soul Mountain and disrupt your so-called Martial Soul Array, your Martial Soul lineage will become lambs for slaughter in my hands. Gongsun laughed aloud. He ignored Yu Chao's frantic attacks. He guarded himself with the impenetrable power of the protector sword as he approached the Martial Soul Mountain with lightning speed. Yu Chao's expression was ugly. He launched several attacks, but he failed to harm Gongsun, who was protected by the power of the protector sword. As a ninth heavenly layer chaotic prime of the Martial Soul lineage, there was nothing he could do to Gongsun. So what if you have a protector sword? You're still just a god king. Yu Chao snorted coldly. Suddenly, he struck out again. Terrifying energy surged in the space there as he directly threw a punch at the space in front of Gongsun. Immediately, the space there collapsed, forming a huge crack right in front of Gongsun. Gongsun's expression changed slightly. He immediately stopped and stared at the crack through the light around him. When he saw the temporal vortices in the crack, he could not help but become slightly afraid. Those temporal vortices are the most terrifying objects in spatial cracks. It's said that millions or even billions of years can pass in an instant once someone falls into them, or maybe time can regress by millions of years. Let alone millions of years, would I still exist in this world after regressing 100,000 years? Gongsun's heart shivered as he stared at the temporal vortices. 100,000 years ago, he was not even born yet. Without any hesitation, Gongsun immediately retreated. He pulled far away from the spatial crack to stop himself from falling in. However, Yu Chao clearly wanted to trap Gongsun like this. He constantly threw his fists in the distance. Every punch would fly over with astonishing power, smashing through space and constantly creating spatial cracks around Gongsun. At that moment, Gongsun was stuck. He felt an instinctual fear towards the temporal vortices that wreaked havoc in the spatial cracks. He dared not set his foot in there. This was because he had no confidence that his protector sword could fend off the power of the temporal vortices. Humph. At this moment, a cold snort rang out. A streak of light shot towards the Martial Soul Mountain. It was extremely bright, illuminating the surroundings and directly landing on Yu Chao. Immediately, Yu Chao let out a grunt and was sent flying. His chest had been penetrated, leaving behind a bowl-sized hole. At the same time, a bright light condensed from the laws of the sun reached Gongsunji's feet. It flickered with golden light as the golden solar flames burned on it. "Leader, step onto it. I'll guide you over." Su Zhiping's voice rang out in Gongsunji's head. Gongsunji hesitated slightly as he looked at the surging solar flames on the golden bridge. He glanced at the protector sword in his hand before gritting his teeth in the end and setting foot on there. The golden bridge began to shrink. As Gongsunji stood on it, he rapidly approached the mountain soul. During this time, Zang tried interfering to prevent Gongsunji from approaching the martial soul mountain, but he was firmly pinned down by Huangfugi. He could not break free. In the end, Gongsunji arrived before the martial soul mountain very soon under the guidance of Su Zhiping. He directly entered the colossal sun condensed from the laws of the sun. "Quick, attack the martial soul mountain with your full power," Su Zhiping said sternly as he stood beside Gongsunji. Gongsunji nodded. He looked at the mountain soul that hovered before him, and he experienced joy from the bottom of his heart. In the past, let alone standing before the martial soul mountain, even just catching a glance of the mountain soul was a wild thought for him, as he did not possess that right even as the lord of a peak. As for all the successors of the martial soul lineage, they were undefeatable existences in his eyes. In particular, Zang, Chu Jian, and Yu Chao stood like insurmountable mountains. However, not only was he standing so close to the martial soul mountain now, but he would even personally destroy it. Gongsunji struggled to remain calm over such a difference between his past and the present. "From today onwards, the martial soul lineage will cease to be our Radiant Saint Hall's greatest enemy because they will no longer possess that right," Gongsunji said slowly. He raised the protector sword high up and directly swung it at the mountain soul with astonishing power. Boom! With a deafening rumble, the strike from Godslayer's sword completely exceeded Su Zhiping's previous attempts. It struck the mountain soul with a terrifying blow, immediately causing the protective barrier of light to tremble and flicker. Even the entire mountain soul shook from the attack. So powerful. That strike has already reached the 5th heavenly layer. It might even be at the 6th heavenly layer. Su Zhiping was secretly astonished. The might of Godslayer's sword shocked him. And that's only because Gongsunji's personal cultivation is insufficient. If he possessed Xianzhan's strength, the protector sword would be even more terrifying in his hands. He might even be able to destroy the screen of light with a single strike, thought Su Zhiping. His desire for a protector sword became stronger. Even if he could not use the protector sword, he could let his clansmen control it. Once that happened, his Su family would gain great renown across the saints' world. "Sha Yun, stop your attacks. Work with me to keep the martial soul mountain trapped so that they don't run away. Leave the rest to the leader," said Su Zhiping. "All right. You two keep the martial soul mountain trapped and leave the rest up to me." Gongsunji was brimming with courage as he continued his assault on the mountain soul. Chapter 26-23. The power of 8 deafening booms constantly rang out in outer space. Terrifying sound waves and devastating shockwaves swept through the area, reducing the space there to shards. Gongsunji shone brightly as he wielded Godslayer's sword. He launched relentless attacks at the mountain soul. Whenever he swung down, the might created would be enough to cleave worlds into two. Space would shatter. His power was extremely astonishing. On the other hand, the mountain soul seemed like it had sunken into quicksand under the restraints from Su Zhiping and Sha Yun. It moved in an extremely sluggish manner, so it was unable to avoid Gongsunji's attacks. As a result, the mountain soul could only depend on its sturdy barrier to block Gongsunji's violent attacks. The mountain soul can't last much longer. "The protector swords from the Radiant Saint Hall are too powerful," Chu Jian said sternly from inside the martial soul array on the martial soul mountain. He was extremely solemn. The danger that their martial soul lineage faced this time was much greater than what they experienced back on the desolate plain. This was all because of the protector swords from the Radiant Saint Hall. The protector swords were just too powerful, with Godslayer's sword in particular. Gongsun clearly could not unleash its full power, but the might of the attacks were no weaker than the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliances. A figure shot over with lightning speed. He moved extremely quickly as he headed directly towards the mountain soul. He was Yu Chao. Originally, he was responsible for keeping Gongsun busy. Now that Gongsun was set on attacking the Martial Soul Mountain, he had been freed up as well. He could only return to the mountain soul. Su Zhiping and Sha Yun naturally discovered Yu Chao's approach. A cold light flickered through Sha Yun's eyes immediately. He was about to deal with Yu Chao. Don't pay attention to him. Concentrating your power on keeping the Martial Soul Mountain trapped is the priority. Once we scatter our power, it's extremely likely for them to flee with a secret technique. Once they really do escape, there will be endless future problems, Su Zhiping said sternly. With that, Sha Yun immediately held back his urge to attack. He sniggered and said, fair enough. It's extremely likely that Yu Chao is purposefully trying to pass through our seal despite all the risk just to lure us into attacking him. We're currently doing all that we can to keep the Martial Soul Mountain trapped. If we really do scatter some of our power, even if it's just a tiny sliver, it's extremely likely for the Martial Soul lineage to escape. Yu Chao returned to the mountain soul successfully. He appeared before Jian Chen and the others immediately. Currently, Yu Chao was pale-faced and covered with blood. In particular, a bowl-sized hole in his chest stood out. The flesh around the wound had been charred by Su Zhiping's laws of the sun. Third senior brother, how are you? The faces of everyone in the Martial Soul Array hardened as they asked in concern when they noticed Yu Chao's wound. Third senior brother, were you injured by Su Zhiping? Jian Chen looked at Yu Chao's wound, and his face became rather sunken. He could clearly sense extremely pure lingering traces of the laws of the sun. With the lingering traces of the laws, Yu Chao was unable to recover. His condition would even constantly worsen, so his wounds that were not particularly severe in the beginning would become worse and worse. It's no problem. Our priority is dealing with the danger that we face right now. Come, let's form the Martial Soul Array with 7 people. Let's see how much first senior brother's strength will increase once we combine all our strength. It'll be up to first senior brother to stop them now. Yu Chao ignored his wounds. As soon as he arrived, he immediately joined them in the Martial Soul Array. With his addition, the Martial Soul Array immediately became much more powerful. It was far, far more powerful than back on the desolate plain. In the distance, Han Zhang's face lightened up as he battled Huang Fugi. With Yu Chao's addition, he immediately felt his strength rapidly increase. Suddenly, he bellowed out, and his presence surged out like a flood. He directly threw a punch. He had clearly used some sort of powerful secret technique with the punch. The fist crushed the space there. With astonishing power, it directly colliding with a spear that Huang Fugi had condensed from the laws of slaughter. Boom! With a great rumble, the spear actually cracked when it collided with Han Zhang's fist, dispersing into the surroundings as fragments of laws. Han Zhang's fist continued onwards without slowing down, hurtling towards Huang Fugi's face like it was unstoppable. Wherever it passed, space would crumple like paper. Huang Fugi's expression hardened. However, he was wearing a set of god artifact armor, so he was fearless. The power of slaughter permeated his surroundings, making him seem like a god of war with an iron heart. Laws condensed on his hands as terrifying energy surged as he directly struck out with lightning speed. The punch and palm strike collided like worlds. The tremendous explosion and shockwave seemed to split the universe into 2. The sea of stars in the surroundings vanished as the entire region of space descended into chaos. Huang Fugi's expression immediately changed. He was pushed back uncontrollably by the violent storm of energy as his face became flushed. With his cultivation as a peak 4th heavenly layer Grand Prime and the laws of slaughter he had comprehended, he had still been knocked back by a single punch from Han Zhang. This is power that is almost on par with the 5th heavenly layer. Huang Fugi was stern. He was still able to match Hun Zang before, but now, he had been forced into an inferior position by Hun Zhang's new strength. Moreover, to his terror, Hun Zhang's strength was not the only thing that had grown. Even his martial soul force had become greater. At this moment, the protective barrier on the mountain soul shook unsteadily under the attacks of the protector sword. The entire mountain soul shook violently. It was on the verge of collapse. The mountain soul can't last much longer, thought Hun Zang. Due to the martial soul array, he completely understood the situation of the mountain soul. Once the mountain soul fell, the martial soul array would be disrupted, and the consequences would be unthinkable. As a result, he did not spend too much time dealing with Huang Fugi. He immediately rushed back to the mountain soul. Hun Zang, our battle still hasn't ended yet. Huang Fugi immediately blocked Hun Zhang's way. The laws flared around him. Clearly, he was ready to use his full strength to pin down Hun Zang and prevent him from providing any assistance. Huang Fugi, you are the one seeking death. Hun Zhang's voice was frigid. In the next moment, surging martial soul force suddenly shot out of his forehead as an invisible sword, crossing through space and directly slashing at Huang Fugi. At this urgent moment, Hun Zang could no longer care about the expenditure of the power of his soul. He directly used the heaven-severing technique. Even Huang Fugi, a peak 4th heavenly layer Grand Prime, was unable to defend himself before martial soul force. The heaven-severing technique passed through all of his defenses and landed firmly on his soul. Huang Fugi let out a grunt. The heaven-severing technique was just too powerful. His soul began to collapse after taking on the attack, where the splitting pain immediately turned him sheet white. However, Hun Zang had used up half of the power of his soul after using the heaven-severing technique. It was not just him either. Even Chu Jian, Yu Chao, Yun Ziding, Su Qi, Bai Rufeng, Qing Shan, and Jian Shen had all lost half of the power of their souls as they maintained the martial soul array. Chapter 26-24. Hun Zang heavily injured after using the heaven-severing strike. Hun Zang became rather pale. He seemed slightly haggard. No one would be well off if they expended half the power of their soul in an instant. However, this price came with an extremely astonishing effect. Having received the heaven-severing strike, Huang Fugi was now clutching his head in pain as he rapidly retreated while grunting in agony. His face had become sheet white. 2 streaks of blood ran down from his eyes. His sheet-white face and the 2 horrifying streaks of blood created quite a chilling sight. At that moment, Huang Fugi had been completely incapacitated. The heavy injuries to his soul had temporarily cut off all his senses from the outside world. Hun Zang glanced past Huang Fugi coldly while feeling a tinge of pity in his heart. This was because killing Huang Fugi was a piece of cake in his current state. However, it would take a little more time. The mountain soul's defenses were currently facing the danger of collapsing, and once that happened, the martial soul array would definitely be disrupted by Su Zhiping and the others. He did not have the time to kill Huang Fugi at all. Swish! With a single movement, Hun Zang vanished. He hurried towards the mountain soul as quickly as he could. Boom! 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 The rumbles near the mountain soul never stopped. Instead, they clearly became more and more hurried and more frequent. Gongsun Ji wielded Godslayer's sword like he had endless power, swinging it at the mountain soul as hard as he could. He moved faster and faster. The mountain soul shook violently as the barrier of light trembled greatly. It was showing signs of cracking. The mountain soul clearly could not last much longer. The martial soul mountain is almost giving way. Leader, quickly! Su Zhiping called out as he continued to keep the mountain soul trapped with the laws of the sun. However, there was no joy on his face at all. Instead, he had become extremely stern, and his voice had become rather frantic as well. He had been constantly paying attention to the battle between Huang Fugi and Hun Zang. He clearly saw Huang Fugi getting heavily injured, so he became filled with fear, or even dread, towards the heaven-severing technique of the martial soul lineage. He possessed similar strength to Huang Fugi. Since even Huang Fugi had suffered such a horrible fate, it was impossible for him to end up any better if he were struck by the same secret technique. As a result, he could not help but panic slightly when he sensed Han Zang hurrying over. He had completely offended the martial soul lineage today. Once the martial soul lineage escaped, his Su family would be the target of the martial soul lineage's endless vengeance. That would definitely be a disaster for the Su family. To the other side, Gongsun had also learnt from Su Zhiping that Han Zang was hurrying over. After a moment of hesitation, craziness immediately filled his eyes. He suddenly cut open his hands and allowed his blood to spray onto Godslayer's sword. Immediately, Godslayer's sword shook gently. It produced a deep thrum as if the slumbering sword spirit had begun to awaken under the stimulation of Gongsun blood. At the same time, a devastating power even greater than before erupted from Godslayer's sword. The terrifying energy surged out, sculpting an extremely blurry figure. Godslayer's sword seemed to gain a certain sense of charm with the appearance of the blurry figure such that the sword became something living. At the same time, Su Zhiping's eyes narrowed. He stared right at the blurry figure drawn from the surging energy on the protector sword, and a wondrous light appeared in his eyes. I can actually sense the sliver of a presence that belongs to something living from the sword. It looks like these protector swords aren't as simple as I imagined them to be. Su Zhiping was secretly surprised. However, due to his own limited power, Gongsun failed to notice this at all. He bellowed out at the sky and clutched the hilt with both hands. Energy surged around him as he swung the sword at the mountain soul again after being strengthened. With a boom, the defensive barrier around the mountain soul sunk in with the slash. Where Godslayer's sword had struck, the surroundings of the barrier constantly creaked as cracks appeared. Very soon, the power of the slash ran out. It had almost shattered the defenses of the mountain soul. Ha ha ha, martial soul lineage, I would like to see how you handle my next attack. Gongsun laughed aloud. Through Godslayer's sword, he knew that the defenses of the martial soul mountain had reached its limits already. Without any hesitation, madness flared up in his eyes, and he lifted the sword high above his head again. His hands trembled as he held the sword. His essence blood constantly poured out from the wounds on his hands. He allowed the hilt to absorb the blood in exchange for even greater power. Godslayer's sword would exhaust quite a lot of Gongsun essence blood with every such attack. This was equivalent to throwing his life on his line, using his own life to fight. Gongsun could not deal many attacks like that with his current strength. As Gongsun slashed out, the blurry figure appeared once again on the sword. It was connected to Godslayer's sword such that they seemed to be perfectly fused and inseparable. It was the sword, and the sword was it. However, it was just too blurry. Only a rough silhouette was visible. Whether it be the facial features or the limbs, none of them were clear. It was very easy to confuse it with a chaotic ball of energy. Gongsun trembled even more. His face had also paled. He had lost a third of his essence blood, quite a great loss to his vitality. However, his face was filled with madness and excitement. He clenched the sword and suddenly swung down, erupting with devastating power that could split the galaxies. The sword fell directly towards the mountain soul like a sword of judgment. Arg! At the same time, Han Zang bellowed out furiously. His presence became astonishing as he charged right towards Godslayer's sword. In an instant, he arrived before Godslayer's sword. All of his energy immediately surged out, forming a huge shield in front of the sword. Behind him was the mountain soul. In its current state, it definitely could not endure the attack. Boom! With a great rumble, the shield condensed with all the power that Han Zang possessed crumbled like paper before Godslayer's sword. The sword continued onwards without stopping, directly passing through Han Zhang's body. Han Zang had been cut into two along his chest. Even his medium-quality god artifact armor had been split in half. At the same time, the expressions of the 7 people who maintained the martial soul array all changed. Blood sprayed from their mouths. They were connected to Han Zang through the martial soul array. As Han Zang was heavily injured, they were affected as well. First senior brother. Su Qi cried out as she paled in fright. The expressions of Chu Jian, Yu Chao, Yun Ziding, Bai Rufeng, and Qing Shan had changed drastically as well. Boom! At the same time, a deafening rumble rang out. The sword landed on the mountain's soul with a resplendent glow, and the defenses finally caved in, shattering under the strike. Jian Shen and the others who currently stood within the martial soul array were directly exposed before Gongsun Ji, Su Zhiping, and Sha Yun. Chapter 26-25. The rain in outer space having lost the protective barrier of light around the mountain soul, the 7 people who stood in the martial soul array were immediately thrown into the middle of danger. They could not afford any interference to the martial soul array, as all of their power and vital energies were concentrated on Han Zang. As a result, they could not use their own power at all unless they stopped the martial soul array. However, once they stopped the martial soul array, they would have nothing to use against Sha Yun and Su Zhiping. However, even though they were basically doomed, the 7 successors of the martial soul lineage showed no despair at all. It was as if the danger they currently faced could not really threaten their lives. Ha ha ha, I've finally shattered the shell that has been protecting you. Without the shell, you are all just ants putting a last, desperate struggle in my eyes. Today, the legend of the martial soul lineage will end in my hands. I will destroy the greatest enemies of the Radiant Saint Hall. I will be the greatest contributor to the Radiant Saint Hall across its countless years by destroying you. I will complete the wish that the past leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall failed to fulfill. At the same time, I will avenge all the hallowed Saint Masters that have died to your hands during all these years. Gongsun Ji held Godslayer's sword. Even though Godslayer's sword had sapped his vitality after absorbing his essence blood twice, he paid no attention to his personal feebleness. He viciously stared at the 7 successors of the martial soul lineage who were waiting for their deaths as he became extremely excited. I, Gongsun Ji, am destined to become the greatest leader of the Radiant Saint Hall over its countless years in the future. The Radiant Saint Hall will definitely shine resplendently in my hands. Gongsun Ji laughed aloud. His laughter was filled with arrogance and haughtiness. The martial soul lineage renowned across the saints' world was about to be destroyed under his lead. This made Gongsun Ji gain an even better recognition of just how astonishing the power he now possessed was. This made his confidence swell to the point where he felt invincible. Most importantly, he was about to take back the method of the Exalted Saint. Once he obtained the method of the Exalted Saint, Gongsun Ji was confident that he would become a supreme figure who stood at the apex of the saints' world. We can only use our final move, said Chu Jian sternly on the mountain soul as he stared at Gongsun Ji who was laughing wildly. His voice rang out in the heads of the other successors. All of them became stern. Jian Chen's heart sank as well. Naturally, he knew what this so-called final move was referring to. This final move was the final life-saving trump card of the martial soul lineage. The move would cause all of the mountain soul's energy to explode. During the devastating explosion, everyone would lose their bodies and everything they possessed on them, space rings, armor, and so on. Only their souls would survive in the end. A mysterious power would protect their souls during the explosion and send their souls back to the true martial soul mountain. As a result, their souls would not be destroyed. As long as their souls remained intact, they would not die. They would just need some time to rebuild their bodies, and then they would be able to return to their previous state. Now that they had reached the end of the road, perhaps this was the only choice they could make. Seniors, the price to use that move is far too great. However, I do have a trump card that might be able to deal with our current predicament, said Jian Chen. He could not afford to leave because he was not alone. He still had many acquaintances and family on the cloud plane. If they really used the final move, the Tian Yuan clan would definitely be destroyed. With that, an extremely astonishing sword chi began to radiate from his body. At the same time, his eyes lost their original colors. Two piercing lights began to shine. One of his eyes had become a dazzling violet, while the other had become a deep azure. The two eyes flickered with azure and violet light. At that moment, Jianshan seemed quite demonic. This was the power of the twin swords. Jianshan had already called out the sword spirits and was preparing to fuse the swords. He had already reached the end of the road now. Even if he had to expose his identity, he would still do it. Just as Jianshan was about to fuse the twin swords, the heartless child slowly stood up on the roof of a structure in the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. His eyes pierced through the space there and directly landed on the Mountain Soul's location. The fate of the martial soul lineage has nothing to do with me, but Jianshan is someone crucial. He can't die here. It looks like it's time for me to take action, the heartless child murmured as if he had not had enough fun yet. It was like from the beginning till the end, the entire battle had been a play or an interesting performance to him. Now that the performance was about to end, he felt a slight sense of pity. Zang is the strongest member of the martial soul lineage. I'll start with him, and then I'll slowly deal with the rest of you. Gongsun chuckled. His eyes locked onto the bisected Zang, and he raised Godslayer's sword high above his head. He was about to slash it at Zang without any hesitation. Stop! First senior brother. Cries rang out from the Mountain Soul. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Killing intent surged in Jianshan's eyes as he immediately urged on the fusion of the twin swords. At the same time, in the southern region of the Cloud Plain, the heartless child slowly raised his hand. He pointed at where Gongsun stood, and just when he was about to take action, his eyes suddenly narrowed. He was surprised, and he muttered, Why has she come? With that, a huge crack silently appeared in the space before Gongsun. The crack seemed to split the world apart. As a result, Gongsun and Zang now seemed to stand in different worlds. In the end, Godslayer's sword struck the spatial crack with surging power. It caused quite a great shockwave in the spatial crack, but Zang was fine. The laws of space. Who is it? Zhiping and Sha Yun's expression changed as they kept the Mountain Soul restrained. They both called out. The two of them just happened to be afraid of any unexpected incidents happening as they destroyed the martial soul lineage. Now that the spatial crack had appeared, their hearts tightened. Suddenly, Zhiping and Sha Yun both wiped their faces. They looked at the water on their hands that came from unknown origins as they were both left at a loss. What? No, this is rain. Where did this rain come from? Zhiping was surprised. He was currently in outer space, so why would rain appear? It's raining. At the same time, Gongsun could not afford to pay attention to what the spatial crack was all about. Instead, he raised his head to look at the disorienting outer space. He was stunned. He could clearly see a great swathe of rain appear out of nowhere, and it actually fell onto his head from the empty space. It doused the region of space. The strange part was that there was clearly no force of attraction, no gravity, in space. Everything floated about, but the rain had truly fallen down from the sky above him. In an instant, it became torrential. There were also flashes of lightning and booming thunder. Gray clouds shrouded the area above him. Chapter 26-26, a turnaround. Gongsun became slightly lost. As he looked at the pouring rain that fell down from outer space, he became both surprised and doubtful. He actually temporarily forgot about Zang who was beside him. Zhiping and Sha Yun were both extremely stern. They realized that their worries had finally come true. In the end, something that they did not wish to see still happened when they tried to destroy the martial soul lineage. With their cultivation, it was impossible for them to not understand that the sudden rain had come from a mysterious expert, a supreme expert that they had failed to sense the arrival of. Soon afterwards, the powerful senses of Sha Yun and Zhiping's souls erupted from their bodies. Like a great blood, they surged out in all directions in an attempt to find the hidden, mysterious expert. However, their expressions changed again very soon. They immediately became extremely stern. The two of them had actually discovered a mysterious and great power that blocked the senses of their souls, preventing their senses from passing through. "Oh no, we've been trapped," Zhiping called out. His face became extremely ugly as he looked at the surroundings with a sunken face. However, the stars had already vanished from where he looked. A thick layer of gray cloud surrounded them as a great prison. The thing that blocked the senses of their souls was the gray cloud. However, Zhiping and Sha Yun would never believe that this was just a gray cloud, as the clouds had energy terrifying enough to make them shiver. "This is a formation. We've been trapped in a formation." Sha Yun's face was sunken. He was the ancestor of a peak sect from the Desolate Plain, a famed expert on the Desolate Plain. Now that he had been trapped in a formation unknowingly, he felt extremely furious. "Let's not worry about that for now. Destroy the martial soul lineage first," Zhiping called out. He had already fallen out with the martial soul lineage completely. If the lineage continued to exist, he would be left forever restless in the future. Although he was not afraid of the martial soul lineage's retaliation, his Su family was a big deal. The clan could not endure the martial soul lineage's revenge. Sha Yun had also realized the severity of the matter. Although he had no idea why this mysterious expert had suddenly cast down a formation to trap them, their priority was clearly to eliminate the martial soul lineage completely. With that, Sha Yun no longer hesitated. His blade jolted, and he immediately shot out a strand of blade chi. He had only swung out casually, but the brutal blade chi split into 8 and shoot towards the 8 successors of the martial soul lineage. Even though Sha Yun's attack was nowhere near as powerful as Gongsun Ji's Godslayer's sword, the 8 strands of blade chi seemed to possess their own intelligence. They all locked onto their target's presence, preventing them from escaping. It was unlike Gongsun Ji attacks, which could not even hit the shadow of his target. Zhiping paid close attention to Sha Yun's 8 strands of sword chi as well. He had to devote all his power onto keeping the mountain soul trapped just in case they wanted to flee. As such, there was nothing that he could do. Wiping out the martial soul lineage would all depend on this. "I hope the mysterious expert who cast down this formation has nothing to do with the martial soul lineage, or," Zhiping thought. As he watched the blade chi rapidly draw nearer, he became utterly nervous. Crack! Suddenly, a shocking bolt of lightning exploded in the space there and lit up the surroundings. Huge chains of lightning danced around like dragons of light in the thick clouds, leading to a resplendent flash. They immediately struck Sha Yun's 8 strands of blade chi with indescribable speed, producing heavy booms. Sha Yun's powerful blade chi immediately shattered under the lightning, dispersing into the surroundings. At the same time, the surging energy from the blade chi was completely absorbed by the formation. Having personally witnessed this, Zhiping's heart immediately skipped a beat. His expression became extremely ugly. His greatest worry had ended up becoming a reality. The mysterious expert seemed to have come because of the martial soul lineage. At the same time, the members of the martial soul lineage, who were about to use their final move to flee, all raised their heads. All of them were stern and slightly puzzled. Isn't this?" At the same time, Jianchen forcefully stopped the fusion of the twin swords. He stared at the torrential rain and rolling clouds with interest as he felt extremely surprised. He had already recognized the formation, and he knew who had cast it down. "May I ask who you are? Please show yourself," Zhiping called out. A blurry figure suddenly appeared in the rain. The power of clouds and rain surrounded the figure, completely obscuring their appearance. All that was visible was an extremely blurry silhouette. It was even impossible to distinguish their gender. The person just hovered in the heavy rain like this. It was as if they had fused with the rain, and it was also as if they had fused with space. Their presence could not be sensed at all. Zhiping and Sha Yun's eyes narrowed. They both stared at the blurry figure as they became solemn. As Grand Primes, they were able to sense and perceive everything with greater clarity. The two of them gained the false impression that the blurry figure was the ruler of the world, someone who could influence the law and order of the surroundings. Suddenly, Zhiping's heart leapt. He growled and said, I know who you are. You are the Rain Abbess of the Cloud Zurge Empire from the Delight Plain. What? She's actually the Rain Abbess of the Delight Plain? Sha Yun was surprised by that. He had heard quite a lot of rumors regarding the Rain Abbess. The Rain Abbess status on the Delight Plain was equivalent to the Celestial Sword Saint's status on the Desolate Plain. They were both supreme experts that no one could defeat, making them extremely aloof. They alone could pressure all the peak experts of an entire plane to the point of suffocation. As a matter of fact, there were even people who treated the Rain Abbess of the Delight Plain as someone on the same level as the Celestial Sword Saint from their Desolate Plain. After learning that the figure was the Rain Abbess, both Sha Yun and Su Zhiping could not help but gasp. They became extremely cautious. I don't want to harass you. You can go, the Rain Abbess said. She gave off a bearing of authority as she spoke to them without leaving any room for refutation. It was as if she did not take Su Zhiping and the other seniors at all. Rain Abbess, are you protecting the Marshal's soul lineage? Su Zhiping asked with some reluctance to accept the whole situation. If he let the Marshal's soul lineage go, all that awaited his Su family was endless trouble. I give you 10 seconds. You can leave safely during that time. After those 10 seconds, you can no longer blame me for harassing the weak, the Rain Abbess said coldly, directly stating an ultimatum. She left no room for negotiation. Chapter 26-27, The Strength of the Rain Abbess. 1. Su Zhiping and Sha Yun's expressions became extremely ugly when they faced the Rain Abbess' order-like tone. They even felt furious. The Rain Abbess was simply far too overbearing. After all, the two of them were famed, peak figures on the Desolate Plain. Even though their cultivation could not rival the Rain Abbess, she had still taken them far too lightly. She actually treated them like she was above them. As a result, Su Zhiping and Sha Yun, who usually gave the orders and could determine the situation and direction of the entire Desolate Plain, felt extremely uncomfortable. Brother Su, it looks like the Rain Abbess of the Delight Plain is determined to protect the Marshal's soul lineage. What do we do? Sha Yun asked secretly. He was surrounded by a layer of extremely brutal blade qi, and his voice was extremely stern. Our actions today have already resulted in the development of an unforgivable grievance with the Marshal's soul lineage. Based off the Marshal's soul lineage's past behavior, they will definitely seek revenge in the future. Coupled with how they have the Marshal's Soul Mountain as a place to retreat to, they can immediately vanish with the Marshal's Soul Mountain if they can't win. The method of trapping them here today probably won't work again, so if we don't destroy the Marshal's soul lineage completely today, the ones being destroyed in the future will likely be our Su family, the Mid-Heaven clan, and your Divine Blade sect, Su Zhiping replied sternly. The Rain Abbess' appearance had thrown him into a dilemma. Sha Yun sighed inside. He had never thought the Marshal's soul lineage would actually have the backing of someone as powerful as the Rain Abbess. If he had known earlier that the Marshal's soul lineage was under the protection of the Rain Abbess, he never would have opposed them even if it meant sacrificing a protector sword from the Radiant Saint Hall. After a moment of hesitation, Sha Yun continued, why don't we try negotiating with the Rain Abbess? As long as the Marshal's soul lineage can forgive us for what we did today and swear that they won't make trouble for us in the future, we won't oppose the Marshal's soul lineage again. Sha Yun was grim. In the past, the three organizations had never been on any particular bad terms with the Marshal's soul lineage. It was all because of Gongsun Ji that they became enemies. Su Zhiping shook his head gently. It's useless. Look at the Rain Abbess. Does she seem like she wants to negotiate with us? And considering how stubborn every single member of the Marshal's soul lineage is, they will never agree. At this moment, Huang Fugi, who had been heavily injured by Hun Zhang's heaven-severing technique, finally recovered. With a sheet-white face and bleeding facial cavities, he flew over from the distance slowly. The Rain Abbess formation of Cloud Surge and Rainflood was extremely large. Even though Huang Fugi was relatively far away from the mountain soul, he was still within the range of the formation. Huang Fugi stared at the hazy Rain Abbess with bloodshot eyes and said sternly, Rain Abbess, the Midheaven clan, Su family, Divine Blade sect, and Radiant Saint Hall are all working together. We now represent the most powerful organization on the desolate plain. We can even represent the entire desolate plain. Offending an entire plain for the martial soul lineage is not wise. And, Rain Abbess, it seems like your delight plain isn't very peaceful either. I hope the Rain Abbess can properly consider this all. Huang Fugi knew quite a lot about the situation on the delight plain. He knew that the Rain Abbess seemed to be interested in conquering the entire place, so over 70% of the peak organizations there had secretly formed an alliance. They were ready to oppose the Cloud Zerg Empire's attempt. As a result, he directly mentioned the situation of the Delight Plain in hopes that the Rain Abbess could realize what he was trying to point at. The native organizations from the Delight Plain were already enough work for the Cloud Zerg Empire. Offending the peak organizations on the desolate plain as well would really not be a wise decision. The Cloud Zerg Empire only possessed such a great status because of the Rain Abbess existence. If the Rain Abbess were gone, the Cloud Zerg Empire would even pale slightly in comparison to their Midheaven clan. This was because the Cloud Zerg Empire did not have a second Mid-Grand Prime. After saying that, Huang Fugi paid close attention to the Rain Abbess. He hoped that his words would influence the Rain Abbess into retreating due to the difficulties that would be involved. Unfortunately, they achieved nothing. All that awaited them was a cold sentence from the Rain Abbess. You still have the final 3 seconds. The Rain Abbess did not say much. It was only a few words, but it disclosed her determination. She left no room for negotiation, and she did not take the peak organizations on the desolate plain seriously either. She was truly insolent and utterly fearless. I want to destroy the martial soul lineage today. No one can stop me. Suddenly, Gongsun bellowed out. Godslayer's sword in his hand shone with dazzling light as an earth-shaking power leaked out. With the sword in hand and light around him, he directly slashed at the Rain Abbess. He did not know who the Rain Abbess was, nor did he know how powerful the Rain Abbess was. However, he did have Godslayer's sword in hand. Under the protection of the sword's power, he feared no expert. He feared no threat. No matter who you are, I'll cut you to pieces first since you're getting in the way of me destroying the martial soul lineage, Gongsun called out. Godslayer's sword shone brightly as billowing energy erupted like a flood. He directly slashed at the Rain Abbess. A gleam of vicious light immediately flashed through Zhiping's eyes when he saw Gongsun attack the Rain Abbess. If there was only him and Sha Yun, he naturally would not have the courage to point his weapon at the Rain Abbess. However, he could give it a try if Gongsun was included. Even though Gongsun personal cultivation was lackluster, the sword in his hand could not be underestimated. Huang Fugi, let's cooperate with Gongsun to keep the Rain Abbess trapped. Sha Yun, kill the martial soul lineage quickly, Gongsun said to Huang Fugi and Sha Yun secretly. With that, Zhiping moved without any hesitation at all. The dense laws of the sun around him immediately flared into solar flames. They flooded towards the Rain Abbess as they flickered in an attempt to suppress the Rain Abbess. Huang Fugi did not hesitate either. Even though his soul was heavily injured, which affected his battle prowess, he could not care about it all at a time like this. He forcefully struck out despite the risk of his soul's wounds rapidly worsening. He did not dare to leave the martial soul lineage alive. If they were not destroyed today, the ones destroyed would likely be Huang Fugi's Midheaven clan instead. Moreover, Huang Fugi had truly come to understand the strength of the martial soul lineage through this battle. The martial soul lineage could injure him to such a degree when they were in a hurry. If they had plenty of time to prepare, his fate would probably be far worse than just a wounded soul. Even he would suffer like this, so the fate of his Midheaven clan would go without saying. An illusionary river was conjured above Huang Fugi's head. It surged with huge waves. Terrifying and dense killing intent surged out from the river, annihilating the space there. This was the greatest secret technique that Huang Fugi possessed. He used his comprehension of the way of slaughter to conjure a river of slaughter. It crushed down on space along the way and gushed towards the Rain Abbess with a presence of slaughter that could seemingly obliterate anything. When he used this secret technique, Huang Fugi could not help but cough up a few mouthfuls of blood. It was very harmful to him to use such a powerful secret technique in his current state. Immediately, Gongsun Ji, Su Zhiping, and Huang Fugi struck out against the Rain Abbess simultaneously. As for Sha Yun, he rushed towards the martial soul lineage. Chapter 26-28, The Strength of the Rain Abbess. 2. You want to try acting up before me even with your strength? You overestimate yourselves. The Rain Abbess was surrounded by dense power, blurring her figure and appearance. Only a cold voice rang out. Facing Su Zhiping, Huang Fugi, and Gongsun Ji's combined attacks, the Rain Abbess was extremely composed. Her cool, frigid voice was filled with a sliver of disdain towards the three of them. As a matter of fact, even Sha Yun's attempt to kill off the martial soul lineage seemed like a foolish and hilarious act in the Rain Abbess' eyes. Crack! Suddenly, thunder exploded loudly in the surging sea of clouds. A huge bolt of lightning shone with illuminating light. It tore through space like a twisting, furious dragon and pierced through the clouds as it traveled directly towards Sha Yun. The lightning flickered with sparks as if it were covered with a layer of thin hair. Each spark was extremely terrifying. As they danced about, space would become riddled with cracks. The moment the lightning fell, Sha Yun's expression changed drastically. He became extremely grim. Regular lightning could not even touch a hair of his with his cultivation as a peak third heavenly layer Grand Prime. However, this bolt of lightning possessed devastating power that made him shiver. The level of the laws of lightning within it had completely exceeded his comprehension of the way of the blade. As a matter of fact, he felt that it was possible that the bolt of lightning was no longer as simple as something condensed from the energy of the world. Instead, it was an attack completely condensed from the laws of lightning, making it extremely powerful. The lightning moved far too quickly, arriving with a single flash. Sha Yun was unable to dodge it despite his great cultivation. At that critical moment, Sha Yun gave up on attacking the martial soul lineage without a second thought. He swung the blade in his hand at the aggressive bolt of lightning using his full strength. The attack condensed the powerful and ruthless intent from Sha Yun's way of the blade. It had also fused with Sha Yun's vital energies, so the blade intent that erupted from the attack surged out like a flood, obliterating all the rain nearby. Sha Yun's attack was powerful, but the bolt of lightning was even mightier. When Sha Yun's blade came in contact with the lightning, there was no impact at all. The blade and Sha Yun was completely swallowed up by the lightning. His attack only managed to make the lightning dim slightly. That was it. Arg! Sha Yun's cry, perhaps out of fury or perhaps out of agony, rang out from the blinding lightning. In the next moment, he flew backwards out of the lightning. His face had become completely charred, and it was like he had been burnt black. It was not just his face. All of his exposed skin had become pitch black as well. Even the god artifact on him had completely dimmed. He gave off a heavy smell of being burnt. Having endured the bolt of lightning, Sha Yun seemed to run out of energy. He clutched his blade as he laid in the air powerlessly. Sparks constantly flickered on his charged body, and every time that happened, he could not help but jolt a little. The Rain Abbess had not laid a single finger on him from the beginning till the end, but Sha Yun had already gotten heavily injured. At the same time, the Rain Abbess did nothing about Huang Fugi and Su Zhiping's attacks either. Two swords condensed purely out of rain on her left and right shot towards the two with lightning speed. Boom! A great rumble rang out. The sun that Su Zhiping had transformed into blazed with solar flames and gave off incinerating heat. However, it was as thin as paper before the rain sword from the Rain Abbess. His sun had been cleaved into two by the sword. When the solar flames condensed from the laws of the sun came in contact with the sword of rain, they failed to evaporate the rain. Instead, they were put out. Spurt. Blood sprayed from Su Zhiping's mouth as his expression changed from the pain. He had been heavily injured after taking a single strike. At the same time, the other Sword of Rain collided with Huang Fugi. The river of slaughter he had conjured through his strongest secret technique clearly could not withstand a single blow from the Sword of Rain. It was slashed into two and gradually vanished from the space there. Swish! The Rain Abbess sword did not slow down. It shot right through him, passing by Huang Fugi's neck as a hazy streak of light under his shocked gaze. Hot blood spurted out from Huang Fugi's neck as his head was thrown high up. Huang Fugi had been beheaded in a single stroke. Huang Fugi's eyes were filled with shock. Although he knew the Rain Abbess was very powerful, he had never expected her to be so powerful. Even with his great strength that could basically dominate the desolate plain, he was so feeble before the Rain Abbess. Even though he had been injured already and was nowhere close to his peak condition, he was still a fourth heavenly layer Grand Prime after all. It should never have been bad to the point where his head got cut off in a single strike. Zhiping paled in fright when he saw Huang Fugi's head fly off. He ignored his wounds and arrived before Huang Fugi with a flash. He grabbed the body and the flying head, bringing them together again. I heard a few protector swords had appeared in the Radiant Saint Hall recently. The protector swords are indeed very powerful, but in your hands, you're disgracing their names instead. The Rain Abbess did not even glance at Zhiping and Huang Fugi. She stared right at Godslayer's sword that Gongsun Ji swung towards her through the mist and gently shook her head. She raised her hands slowly and caught the sword. As the protector sword cleaved down with devastating power, the Rain Abbess' slender hand wrapped around its sharp edge. As if her 5 slender fingers contained unbelievably great power, they formed a claw and locked down on the two faces of the sword tightly. Godslayer's sword suddenly erupted with terrifying power. It was like a tempest, but it failed to harm the Rain Abbess at all. The Rain Abbess' hand had erupted with a power no weaker than Godslayer's sword. They wore down each other. This was a clash between two supreme powers. Although it was silent and caused no disturbance at all, the pressure was alarming. Zhiping and Huang Fugi were both shocked by it. The Rain Abbess actually caught Godslayer's sword with her bare hands. Huang Fugi's eyes immediately narrowed when he saw this after his head was reconnected. Zhiping glanced around and said grimly, "It is the formation. The formation is very powerful." The Rain Abbess seems to have fused perfectly with the formation, allowing her to use its power as she wishes. She was already extremely powerful. Now that she has assistance of the formation, she has become completely unbelievable. Chapter 26-29, The Strength of the Rain Abbess, 3. Having reached such a conclusion, Huang Fugi and Zhiping's expressions became extremely ugly. At that moment, they realized that if the Rain Abbess did not let them leave, they would probably die right here. The Rain Abbess had already fused with the formation. Within the formation, she was the absolute ruler. Unless the formation was destroyed, they could not leave. Even the powerful, ancient secret techniques that they knew for fleeing were useless in the Rain Abbess formation. The formation of Cloud Surge and Rainflood was no ordinary formation. As soon as it was completed, it was equivalent to its own, individual world, separate from outside. Let alone Zhiping and Huang Fugi, even if they worked with Gongsun Ji, they would still be nowhere close to destroying the formation given the strength and might that the Rain Abbess had just displayed. "Why, you actually caught my Godslayer's sword with your bare hands." Gongsun Ji's shocked voice rang out from the light around him. He understood the power of Godslayer's sword. He even knew its origins, which was exactly why he was shocked when the Rain Abbess caught the sword with her bare hands. After all, Godslayer's sword was the weapon that the leader of the 9 retainers who followed his ancestor in the past had transformed into. His flesh, his cultivation, and all of his vital energies had condensed into the weapon in his hand. According to the fragments of information he received from the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance, he could already guess the leader of the 9 retainers' past cultivation. He was a 9th heavenly layer Grand Prime. Even though he still could not unleash the full power of Godslayer's sword with his current cultivation, he refused to believe that the weapon could just be caught bare-handed in such an easy fashion. Do you really think that no one can do anything to you just because have this sword? The sword is very powerful, but unfortunately, the person who wields it is far too weak, said the Rain Abbess with heavy contempt. With that, her other hand extended out from the power of rain and clouds. It gently pressed towards Gongsun. Her palm strike seemed like a gentle breeze. There were no special effects, nor were there any pulses of energy. However, when she struck out, it felt like all the energy in space, or even the world, was contained in the hand. It was as if the Rain Abbess had not struck out with her hand but with the entire world. Nearby, Zhiping and Huangfugi's faces both hardened. Their eyes immediately narrowed to the size of pins as they stared straight at the Rain Abbess' hand. As fourth heavenly layer Grand Primes, their senses were extremely sharp. They could sense an invisible power of destruction from the Rain Abbess' gentle strike. The power was so great that it shocked them. When the Rain Abbess' gentle hand landed on the protective light around Gongsun, the barrier of light with extremely astonishing defense behaved like it had just received a heavy blow. The entire barrier began to cave in. It was also at this moment that the Rain Abbess' seemingly harmless hand erupted with supreme power. Like a tidal flood, the power immediately condensed into a rain droplet under the Rain Abbess' precise control. It took advantage of the concave protective light and suddenly shot out like a sword in an attempt to penetrate Gongsun's defenses. If Gongsun did not have the protection of the protector sword, just the shockwave from the Rain Abbess' astonishing strike would have been enough to claim his life given his mere cultivation as a god king. Oh no, the Rain Abbess is trying to kill Gongsun. Zhiping and Huangfugi's hearts immediately tightened at the sight of this. They became worried. They did not care about Gongsun's life. What they really cared about was the promise that Gongsun had made to them, which was bestowing the remaining protector swords to the juniors in their clans that had become hallowed saint masters. If Gongsun died here, everything that they did on the cloud plane would have been for naught. The droplet of rain was like a sharp awl, pushing against the protective light and rapidly deepening. The powerful defense that Gongsun took pride in had actually been shaken up by the Rain Abbess. Gongsun stared right at the droplet of rain that gradually approached him through the protective light. Sensing the astonishing power within the rain droplet, his face finally changed. He became filled with fear and worry. There was uncontainable dread in his eyes now. The light has almost collapsed. It has almost given way. Where did this Rain Abbess come from? How is she so powerful? Endure it, endure it. You have to endure it. Godslayer's sword, you were the most powerful retainer under my ancestor in the past. You have to endure it. You can't fail. Gongsun began to panic when he finally faced danger. He prayed inside. At that moment, he could truly feel the threat of death. It made his heart tremble. It made him feel fear. Moreover, even his Godslayer's sword had been firmly clamped down by the Rain Abbess. As a result, Gongsun could not even draw the sword back. He could only watch the protective light from the sword be compressed rapidly while being unable to do anything at all. The Rain Abbess' presence continued to rise. The energy within her erupted violently. All of it gathered on the droplet of rain, providing an endless supply of energy to the droplet. Even power from the formation of cloud surge and rainflood had been poured in such that the droplet of rain did not weaken at all as it became locked in a stalemate against Gongsun protective light. Instead, it grew more and more powerful. The Rain Abbess had basically ignored Zhiping and Huangfugi. Instead, Gongsun had become her greatest target. The Rain Abbess was enveloped with the power of clouds and rain such that her face was shrouded. Otherwise, they would have discovered that her cold eyes were filled with killing intent. However, when only a thin layer of the protective light remained, an extremely ancient will seemed to awaken from within the protector sword. At that moment, Godslayer's sword in Gongsun hands suddenly seemed to gain life. It had sprung to life. As the ancient will awakened, Godslayer's sword suddenly erupted with light. It became even more blinding than the sun in an instant. The protective light that had almost fallen to the rain abyss attack was replenished by a tremendous energy, rapidly stabilizing and slowly pushing back the droplet of rain. The protective light had returned to its previous state. Moreover, its defenses were now much more powerful than before. The awakening of the will did not increase the strength of Godslayer's sword. It only provided the sword with even greater defensive power. The rain abyss snorted coldly. With a single thought, countless bolts of lightning shot over from the formation of cloud surge and rain flood. Every single bolt was like a dragon as they all moved together. It caused a huge disturbance and created quite a grand scene. All of it landed on the protective light around Gongsun. The light endured it all. After being strengthened, it became even more difficult to destroy. Chapter 2630. 9 Brilliant schemes. Seeing how the rain abyss attack had failed to get through his defenses and had instead made the light around him become even more powerful, Gongsun immediately calmed down. At that moment, he suddenly felt like the rain abyss was not as terrifying as he imagined her to be. Ha 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 ha, rain abyss, you aren't weak, but your strength still isn't enough before my defenses. If you have the ability, try to get through them. Gongsun laughed aloud. The strengthening of the protective light had made him extremely confident. He became even more confident that the protective light would not fall no matter who he faced. Once his life was no longer threatened, his fear and dread towards the rain abyss directly plummeted until it completely vanished. Rain abyss, you better save your efforts. You can't get through my defenses with your current strength. If you leave right now and avoid interfering in my grievances with the martial soul lineage, I can forget about your offending actions today. Otherwise, you will become my greatest enemy besides the martial soul lineage. I'll definitely pay a visit to your whatever Cloud Surge Empire with the other protectors of the Radiant Saint Hall some other time, Gongsun said in high spirits. He spoke extremely arrogantly, directly threatening the rain abyss. Su Zhiping and Huangfugi's faces completely darkened after they heard Gongsun words. They both cursed at how ignorant he was, even daring to threaten an expert like the rain abyss. Every single expert on the level of the rain abyss was revered and well respected. It would be best to avoid provoking them. Even if there were some minor disagreements, Su Zhiping and Huangfugi believed that they should just endure it. Even if they could not endure it, they could not afford to offend the rain abyss completely unless they had sufficient strength. In particular, they were currently trapped in the rain abyss formation. If they completely offended her, a good fate would definitely not await them. So much for Gongsun. With a single threat, he directly made the rain abyss a complete enemy. If they still had a chance to reconcile with the rain abyss earlier, that chance had been completely wiped out by Gongsun now. How is Gongsun so stupid? Isn't he just looking for trouble? Huangfugi and Su Zhiping communicated secretly. They had already begun to resent Gongsun. He was under the protection of the Protector Sword, so the Rain Abbess would struggle to harm him, but what about the two of them? They were unable to bear the Rain Abbess' wrath. If it were not for the temptation of the 3 remaining Protector Swords of the Radiant Saint Hall, they would have never been willing to come looking for trouble with Gongsun. Even a mere God King dares to threaten me. Impressive. Very impressive. The Rain Abbess' voice rang out extremely coldly. With that, the formation of cloud surge and rain floods suddenly jolted. The thick clouds that formed a prison at the boundary suddenly began to surge, causing the entire formation to rapidly shrink. As the formation shrank, everyone could sense the might of the formation increase. Afterwards, a tremendous power erupted from the formation of cloud surge and rain flood. Just like a tidal wave, it swept through the entire space within the formation. In the end, a swathe of raindrops formed there. Every droplet of rain possessed pure laws of the world. Every droplet of rain possessed astonishing energy pulses. Afterwards, the droplets of rain gathered in from all directions, surrounding Gongsun with surging energy. In an instant, Gongsun became enveloped by a huge ball condensed from countless droplets of rain. The earth-shaking power and pure laws of the world pressed against Gongsun protective light like maggots, gnawing away at it bit by bit. The Rain Abbess's actions were very simple. Since she could not destroy it, she would wear it down bit by bit. Immediately, the protective light around Gongsun Ji was rapidly compressed. In particular, the outer layer was slowly being gnawed away. Although the process was very slow, his defenses were indeed vanishing. Gongsun Ji could not laugh anymore. His expression changed once again, and an ill omen rose up from his heart. He had already been firmly entrapped by the Rain Abbess. He could not move. He could only endure it all with the defenses of the protector sword. There was nothing else he could do. Huangfu Gi, Su Zhiping, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and do something. Gongsun Ji called out. However, Huangfu Gi and Su Zhiping acted like they had heard nothing. They did nothing. They felt completely powerless before the Rain Abbess' strength. They no longer had any will to fight. They understood that if they kept fighting, the fate that awaited the two of them was death. As a result, even when they knew that the situation was against Gongsun Ji, they did not try to do anything. They were still slightly hopeful that the Rain Abbess would spare them. As for Sha Yun, he just twitched about while drifting through outer space after being heavily injured by the bolt of lightning. He had not recovered. At the same time, on the most sacred star Brilliance mountain that represented the glory and honor of the star Brilliance plain, a middle-aged man in robes riddled with stars sat within a secret room, seemingly cultivating. He was the renowned 9 Brilliant Star Lord. Suddenly, the 9 Brilliant Star Lord slowly opened his eyes. Countless stars seemed to revolve in his eyes, shining with starlight. I anticipated the betrayal of the native organizations on the cloud plain. I also anticipated how the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance would not miss out on this fantastic opportunity, as well as how Gongsun Ji would take action. However, I never, ever considered the possibility of the Rain Abbess killing her way over from the Delight Plain. What puzzles me is why would the Rain Abbess assist Jian Chen, or should I say the martial soul lineage? According to my understanding, she doesn't seem to have any connections to the martial soul lineage or Jian Chen at all. Is there another side to the story? However, her appearance has rendered my plans null. As a result, I have to find a way to keep her busy. Once the Rain Abbess is removed from the equation, just Gongsun Ji's group will be enough to kill Jian Chen. Perhaps Yao can survive. The 9 Brilliant Star Lord muttered to himself. Afterwards, with a flip of his hand, a communication jade talisman appeared. Blue sky, aren't you lacking the main material for your high-quality god artifact, the Watercloud Iron? The Rain Abbess just happens to have a piece of it. After sending the message, the 9 Brilliant Star Lord stowed the jade talisman away and said to himself, with Blue Sky taking part, the Rain Abbess will be completely busy. Now, there shouldn't be any unexpected changes to the situation. Moreover, I only sent a single piece of information to Blue Sky to target the Rain Abbess. It has nothing to do with Jian Chen. However, I still can't get too involved. If I do leave behind some kind of trace and the Inata Grand Exalt catches it, I'll be in trouble. Severing a person's way will lead to unforgivable grievances. Chapter 2631, Planet Wandou. Across the vast Saints world, there were a total of 49 great plains and 81 great planets. Countless cultivators dwelled on them, and numerous sects and clans stood there. Endless conflict and blood being spilt was almost a daily affair. Planet Wandou was one of the 81 great planets. At the same time, it was a planet relatively close to the Cloud Plain, one of the 49 great plains. There was a renowned mountain on planet Wandou. It was called the Venerable Mountain. Basically everyone on planet Wandou knew about this mountain. Its name was widespread. Whenever the cultivators or various organizations on the planet mentioned the mountain, they would all show respect or perhaps even reverence. Venerable Mountain was where the Lord of Planet Wandou cultivated. The Lord of Planet Wandou was the undisputed strongest expert on the planet. His existence on the planet was like the king of a kingdom, a supreme existence. An old man in blue robes currently sat on a throne within a decorated palace on the venerable mountain. His eyes were filled with excitement. During all these years, I've scoured the 49 Great Plains and 81 Great Planets, but I still failed to find a piece of water cloud iron. Let alone the material itself, I couldn't even find any news about it. As a 9th grade god-tier material, it's far too rare, far too precious, and far too difficult to find. However, my faith didn't go unrewarded in the end. I've finally gotten my hands on information regarding the water cloud iron. I have to get it. Even though I think the 9 Brilliant Star Lord is probably scheming something for telling me this, so what if I let him benefit for the sake of the water cloud iron? I'll just treat it as returning the favor for telling me this. Others may fear the rain abbess of the Delight Plain, but I don't, the blue-robed old man murmured to himself. He did not give off any presence at all, but he seemed like he resonated with the ways, seemingly fusing with the surroundings. This was a bearing that would only appear on those who had comprehended the laws of the world to a certain level. As the blue-robed old man said all that, he had left the palace already. With a single step, he entered the boundless sea of stars and hurried to the cloud plain. The old man in blue was the lord of planet Wandou. People called him the Blue Sky Venerable. All 81 great stars in the saints' world possessed a planet lord. Their strength would vary. Basically all the weaker planets had lords that were first or second heavenly layer grand primes, while the stronger planets would have late grand primes or even 9th heavenly layer grand primes. The Blue Sky Venerable was an existence that ranked towards the top among all the planet lords. Experts at such a level would simply travel through the sea of stars. They would rarely use teleportation formations. They would only use them when their destination was extremely distant. The war that spanned the entire cloud plain had begun. The armies of the Four Symbols Alliance had all been mobilized. They charged out of the southern region that they had guarded with painstaking effort and chased the Righteous Alliance to the central region. The experts of the two alliances were currently embroiled in a devastating battle in the central region. Some chaotic primes or even grand primes had reached outer space for their fights. Even though the Righteous Alliance received the full support of the Shi Empire from the north and the Zhao Empire from the east, they were still forced into a retreat by the Four Symbols Alliance due to the heavy toll the betrayal had taken. They suffered heavy casualties. Even the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak was unable to remain uninvolved. He gave up on suppressing the curse and unleashed his cultivation for one last struggle against the Grand Primes of the Four Symbols Alliance. His flame of life wavered. It dimmed. After he stopped suppressing the curse, it spread even faster. Even if the Righteous Alliance emerged victorious in the end, who knows whether the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak would be able to survive. The Pingtian Empire was naturally involved in the war as well. The young Star Lord personally led experts of the Four Symbols Alliance to encircle the empire. The Pingtian Empire was nowhere close to being the young Star Lord and his people's opponent. The formation protecting the empire shattered before long. Afterwards, they charged right towards the imperial palace of the Pingtian Empire. The imperial palace had already been reduced to ruins. Blood flowed through the ruins as countless corpses were strewn about. The young Star Lord had already demolished the imperial palace of the Pingtian Empire. The young Star Lord currently stood with his back turned to the ruins. He stared into the distance arrogantly, looking in the direction of the Dong'an province. Young Star Lord, we've searched the entire imperial palace, but we've failed to find the emperor of the Pingtian Empire's corpse. I think Mo Xingfeng is probably hiding in the Tian Yuan clan, a god king said politely from behind the young Star Lord. It's fine if you can't find him. Destroying the imperial palace is only the appetizer. What's the situation with the Tian Yuan clan? Has their formations fallen yet? The young Star Lord asked commandingly. Young Star Lord, the formations protecting the provincial city are far more powerful than the ones that protect the empire. There's a group of people doing their best to destroy the formation, said the God King. Let's go to the Dong'an province. The young Star Lord waved his hand and immediately rushed to the Dong'an province with many experts. The Dong'an province possessed the only provincial city in perfect condition. The entire place was protected by two powerful formations. One protected the entire city, while the other protected the Tian Yuan clan. The formations were stronger the further in they were. Even chaotic primes would struggle to get through them. Now, the huge city was filled with refugees. The moment the war erupted, some cultivators and nobles had fled to the Dong'an province from the 35 other provinces and imperial city. They hoped that they could avoid the war under the protection of the formations of the provincial city. With a surge of people entering, the tremendous city immediately became packed. The streets and alleyways were filled with people. But now, the people who sought refuge in the city began to regret their choice. They discovered that while the formations were powerful, they were all surrounded by the experts of the Four Symbols Alliance. They could not leave even if they wanted to now. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.